interest.
One item further on when it comes to decisions on Project Bruce decision.
Thank you for that. Can I please have that? Councillor Wheeler has declared an interest regarding your chair of Project Bruce.
Chairperson of Project Bruce.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wheeler.
I'll probably do the same with the middle, although we think we've worked through that, haven't we, Steve? That we don't see it as a conflict because I've been appointed on there. So just want to clarify that point before we do get going there. So,
I'll take the declaration from all the councillors that are on those committees because obviously this is the day.
Yeah.
So can we please take a stated declaration of interest from councillors? Clutha Ward Council. Oh, sorry, Councillor Finch.
I just moved that we accepted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I better go through it though. So the 4 Clutha Ward councillors for the Clutha Hub. Councillor Wheeler for Project Bruce, moved by Councillor Finch, seconded by Councillor Graham. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. If we could move now to item number 1, which is receiving the feedback and submission. I'll take it that this is pretty straightforward, so I won't go to you, Larissa. I'll just take it as read, and I'm willing to receive all 4 recommendations at one. But has anyone got any discussion or question they wish to raise? Councillor Wheeler.
Just regarding these two late submissions that came in from and are they counted in the submissions?
Yes, they are. I think in the extenuating circumstances, we're giving some latitude to the time frame for submissions. Guess what, Larissa, I'm going to have to go over to you, please. Do you have a call on when these came in?
They just copies of.
The dates are recorded on there. As we've always done in the past, we know that you like to see all submissions that have come in, so we've tabled them for your information. You'll see that one is actually anonymous as well. I would comment that there haven't, traditionally we do see at least a handful of anonymous submissions, but that one appears to be the only one that's been received to the annual plan. So we do table it for your information, but just in terms of feedback to the submitter, understandably that won't take place if we don't know who they actually are.
So the anonymous one was that ratepayer for Clutha. That's the only anonymous one that I saw.
Yes, that's right. North Clutha ratepayer.
So can we please change?
Yes. Sorry, just because I think one of the other conventions we said if we wanted to speak, we should be standing up. So for ourselves, just so that they could see. So I just make the point that there's a resolution requiring approval of late submissions as listed. In the agenda, there's 3 late submissions only listed. So these are outside there, and you would say, I'm including those in the list of late submissions, if you accept them.
That is what I am suggesting. Someone put, Councillor Wheeler, that wasn't, you weren't moving that. Does someone else have anything to add for discussion or question, or is someone prepared to move all 4 recommendations?
I'm happy to move, if you wish it.
Thank you, Councillor Herbert. So moved by Councillor Herbert, seconded by Councillor Payne. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. Item number 2 is approval of responses to submitters. Maybe I'll go to Steve for I was going to go through them one at a time.
You wish to in the past, we've just gone page by page.
Yeah. I've gone page by page in other years and then thought at the very end of it that we should have just done them all together because there's no questions. But I will go through the submissions page by page, seeing as no one else is going to give me an interruption. So page 1, fluoridation, I will just go through them, and if anyone has opposition to what the response is, please call out. So we've got fluoridation, the Cancer Society, with smoke-free policy, wills with roads and wills with employment. Rules with council leadership and staff levels. Not as many. So, now I'll go right back to where I wanted to at the start. We've got 2 recommendations, councillor Kennedy.
Just asking a question there, that one on the fluoridation, Brent. So, I noted on one of our other ones that we keep telling people that will keep you informed on any decisions. So it's the same with the fluoridation. You'll let them know what the decisions are going to be or when they're coming up.
But through your worship, yes, that's what we would expect.
2 recommendations there, please, councillors. Someone prepared to move them? Move councillor Prince, seconded councillor Kennedy. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. Item number 3, we've got the capital projects carry forwards. Jules or Steve, do you have any additional information that you wish to add to this item?
I'll let Jules speak, your worship.
No, your worship, happy to take any questions.
Councillors, before we enter into discussion, does anyone have any questions for Jules or Steve? If not, matters open for discussion. Sorry, councillor Kennedy.
I know we have a busy list on this. My worry is that our water scheme that are in the red there get left. I understand that reading through that we're waiting for parts to arrive from overseas and that. I would just like to hopefully with those 2 water schemes that if something needs to be done once the parts arrive, we start to move on them rather than being left over all the time.
Thank you for that, councillor Kennedy. Does anyone else have any comments to make or questions of Lorella?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question regarding the destination toilets and the funding we've got from central government for that, whether there is a time which that funding would have to be spent or accounted for they might want to claw it back.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up from Jules.
Through your worship, we have been in touch with the TIF organisation, well, the organisation responsible for the TIF funding. We've advised them of the change of scope of the Clutha destination toilets, and they were quite comfortable with that change. They haven't advised of a time limit. They've just asked us to keep them informed of our progress and to give them an update once we're progressing to the building consent stage. So we are keeping in contact with them and making sure they're in the loop with both the Clutha and Milton toilet projects.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors, or discussion? Someone prepared to move? I'm happy to take both recommendations. Someone prepared to move councillor Sutherland, seconded councillor Graham. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. Next item is our rural water scheme budget updates. I will hand over to Jules, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Rural Water Scheme meetings were held for all schemes apart from 2 that were right at the start of the lockdown. We've emailed both of those scheme committees and asked if there were any changes they would like to make, and if not, then we would submit the draft budgets as proposed. There was no comment back for those 2 projects. The balance of the recommendations give effect to the decision or the recommendations made by the water scheme committees, because ultimately the council has the delegation to make these decisions. Well, the rural water scheme committees can only recommend to council. Happy to take any questions.
Questions for Jules? General questions open for discussion, councillors. Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Mayor. Jules, to Kerry, I just got a question. Looking at those budgets, why there was such a big jump, and I know it happened from last year, in the insurance costs? And I wrote down a couple of examples. It's on other piece of paper, sorry, but just some of them are like 50%. I'll use the Waipahi one. That actually dropped by, I know it's a small amount, but it dropped by quite a bit, the insurance costs. But some of them actually have gone up significantly. I was thinking of Tuapeka one might be. I know it's happened in this year, but it's just the question was why the big jump. I think like Tuapeka went up 33% or something.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. I think the actual insurance figures in the budgets are not the actual insurance costs. They get charged as they come through from the finance team who arrange your insurances. But whilst there may be a big jump, they're relatively small numbers, so they don't have a major impact on the overall financial position. I'm not aware of any specific reason why they would have jumped, but we would have to go back through to our finance team to confirm that.
Thank you.
Jules, it's not so much, well, there's a question really. I noted that Clutha, Pomahaka and Richardson combined had an increase of 490,000 in their budget. And yet the cumulative effect of all the water schemes budgets meant a net reduction of 135,000. In the environment that we're presently in regarding the water, our infrastructure, what advice was given to the rural water schemes as they put the proposition forward that they were going to reduce their budgets?
Through Your Worship, the key reason that there was a reduction was for the Tuapeka scheme, which was planning to have a new water treatment plant up and running, and there would have been additional operating costs and loan funding for that water scheme, for that treatment plant. That hasn't been completed, as we're looking at whether that would be combined with a larger bore scheme. So while the reduction is compared to the draft budgets, it's still actually an increase on their water rate from last year. So it's the difference between the draft and the recommended budgets moving forward. That water scheme still has significant increases in its future years once the future of that treatment plant has been resolved. And the discussions with the water schemes has been very clear that we have to be in a reasonably short order moving towards full compliance for all schemes. And that's a bottom line that we have to actually achieve. It's pretty clear from the government and from our drinking water assessor that's a priority, and also from council previously.
Thank you. And then the other one was Glencammon Water Scheme. Were they, it seems peculiar that there's a decrease this year with quite a large increase next year. There was no way that smoothing or, you know, what advice were they given?
Through Your Worship, there's actually a significant increase next year for that scheme. It's going from a water rate of $247 to $269, and then has jumps of about $25 a year after that. And again, that is one of the schemes that has a large, a brand new water treatment plant at a budget of about just over 1.7 million on the books. And once that kicks in, there'll be loan funding to pay for that and also additional operating costs. So there is still a reasonable jump this year in anticipation of that new treatment plant and funding coming online.
Sorry, yeah, right now.
Yeah, I think the point, Your Worship, is that these are compared to the 3.61% we went out with. So
Yeah.
it's still an increase, but it's
Not as great as the increase that it was. Okay, is there any further questions?
Just a comment, Your Worship.
Thank you.
And it's just a comment really for people that don't sit on any rural scheme committees, but for your average person, if you've got to times that by 20, 30 or 40 units, you get some idea of what the rural ratepayer pays for water. Because that's about what you're talking.
Yep. Yep, I got myself, John.
Well, you know, like you can sit there and say it's a figure of $251, but when you times that by 30 units, you're talking, you know, substantial amounts of money people are paying.
Yep. I'm quite prepared to take all the recommendations as one. We haven't had any questioning to any great degree on it. So is someone prepared to move all 15 recommendations? Councillor Finch is moving and Councillor Cowie is seconding. No further discussion. Put to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Thank you. Over to page 34, where we've got the rates baseline item for decision. Paper was put together by Sharon or John. Do either of you have any additional information that you wish to give before discussion?
Scott?
No, no, Your Worship. If there's any questions or if you want me to go any through or Sharon, we can do that.
If there's no additional information, we'll just pick you back up in the general discussion if we can. Thank you, John.
Sorry, we just want to check that there wasn't any confusion at all about what we were trying to do. So this was the 3.61% we went out with. And then, of course, it includes the rural water schemes that you've just decided upon. Plus, there was also a further reduction in the interest rate, as interest rates drop. And so what we were highlighting to you before you move into your further decision-making about other aspects was, what was your starting point? So your starting point is 2.63%.
So, councillors, I actually rang Steve yesterday just trying to get the hang of where it is, and also Councillor Foster, when we were talking, I said that it was staff wages, it wasn't, it was interest rates, but you actually pick up that 2.63 later, like page 190 or something, it kicks back in. But what we're just establishing is the starting point. Is everyone quite clear what we're voting on? Because it was a wee bit difficult to carry it on through. So, recommendation there that we received the rates baseline report. Is there any discussion? Sorry, Councillor Bolwheeler.
Thank you, Worship. On page 36, I was just wondering if John and Sharon could just walk us through that. That's at the top, it just says we've reduced the starting balance for the MECO portfolio by 2.5 million. So I was just wondering, not quite sure.
Yeah.
Really got an understanding, but it's got an understanding of that table.
Yes, so through you, Your Worship. So because of the COVID reduction in the portfolio that we had at April, we used that as a starting, or at March, we estimated for May and June. And that gave us like a forecast compared to what we originally had in the original draft forecast. So that means, Councillor Volwheeler, that we had to reduce the opening balance at the beginning of the period to reflect those losses. Some of those losses have subsequently come back, but we were just being conservative in our starting point. And that obviously meant that our interest return, which was lower and the balance was low, was less than we went out with on the draft. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I was just trying to work through the thoughts. So May to June is May to June this year.
That's right. Yeah, so we had a forecast number at April, whereas when we went out with the draft, we had a forecast number at December. And we had a much more rosier picture. So our return was 4% versus 0.5%.
John, I've written it here and I'm desperately scrambling to find out why, but on page 39 I wrote that we're doing our repayments over 15 years, which to me isn't intergenerational in some of these assets. Is it right that it was 15-year repayment? I can't find, I picked that up, but I wrote it to ask.
That's an average that I've just used, because some of that will be short term, some of it will be longer. The model is not as, we wanted to simplify the calculation to get the short term portion. So that's all that calculation was used to for the 15-year. It's an average, Your Worship.
But on our major infrastructure assets, they'd always be over 30 years, wouldn't they?
Yes, but this is just a loan term.
Yeah, around the other way.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, we have got the baseline report. Any further discussions? Someone prepared to move it? Move, Councillor Payne. Thank you. Someone prepared to second it? Councillor Ludeman. All those in favour? Aye. All those against. Thank you. So over to page 44, where we've got the COVID-19 budget impacts and decisions. Steve, I'll turn over to you. Is there anything additional that you wish to bring?
Your Worship, I suppose that really you need to be looking at these one by one. Yes, some of them are probably non-discretionary in the sense that it's just confirmation of things that that we've identified, the investment return reduction, the late payment penalty reduced budget, that's just a fact, for example. But other ones like merging the forestry investment and trade-based charging regime and lease rental are discretionary. And as I said, the salary budget and the internal rate of return are non-discretionary, and the final one is just a consequential decision that you need to apply, which I can also explain as we get there. So, Your Worship, I think it's, you may have not much questioning of some of the non-discretionary ones and debates on the discretionary ones. And I can speak to those individuals.
Thank you. So what we'll do is we'll just take recommendation 1 for a kick-off, and then we will go through the individual items to number 2 separately. So move Councillor Finch that we're receiving the COVID-19 impacts and decisions report, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. All those in favour? Aye. Those against. Now, as we take each individual item, I will vote because obviously they're quite separate. So the first one that we'll talk on is the merge or not to merge of the forestry investment and our NICO finance. Councillor Ludeman.
I personally am not I'm against merging them, because when we sold forestry, that was kind of one of the conditions we put on that, and to be open and transparent to our ratepayers. I think it should stay as it is at this stage.
Thank you for that. Any other, Councillor Wheeler?
Thank you, Worship. I'm not sure if I don't think I oppose it being merged, but I think it still needs to be kept as a separate ledger item in our accounts anyway, rather than being reported separately. As far as the investments go, I think it could be just accounted as one, because all our we have balance items here for all the accounts for the different water schemes and such likes, which we can go back to and which we put the interest into for every year. So as long as it's kept still acknowledged as a separate forestry investment, yeah, but I don't think it needs to be kept separate as far as the NICO portfolio goes. So I haven't explained that very well, but sort of missing the time.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Your Worship, an example would be Sedell. So the Sedell fund is just a pure investment fund, but it's still recorded separately within the ledgers. It's in the main NICO account, but recorded separately.
Yes, thanks. Thank you.
Councillor Cowie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, can I ask a question, John Scott? If the two investments are combined, will we be better off? Will we get a higher interest rate or return with it being a bigger amount, if you get the customer question?
Through your worship to Councillor Cowie, no, we've already got our portfolio, which is all the funds merged there. It's just a case of, putting them together into one sort of reserve, and we're still apportioning the same interest rate allocation as we would normally. So, no, it wouldn't change any of the returns.
Thank you.
I'm just sorry, Your Worship. Just one thing. I mean, we may not be able to forecast it, John, but anybody looking at the returns historically for the two accounts will see that the larger account, for whatever reason, has had a historic higher return annually than the smaller account. And I don't know necessarily whether that's because one's bigger than the other. You would think that they're using the same proportions and the same managed portfolio side of it, but all we can say is that the returns between the two accounts, the larger account has had a higher percentage return annually. I can't explain it, but I can only say.
Thank you.
Councillor Boyle.
I think the reason for the difference is actually the time of when we made the investments, because they were done at different times. The larger account was started first, so there'd be slightly different allocations and those various, the way that it's allocated amongst those different bonds and such like. So I think that's why the difference is there. The other question then is, will there be a lower administration cost charged by our investment managers for just having the one account rather than the two accounts?
I think the investment fee is based on a percentage of the returns, Councillor Volweiler. I don't think it's separate per fund.
Thank you.
Councillor Herbert.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Ludeman. The reasons that this was set up originally on its own haven't changed, and I would like to see it maintain status quo.
I'd have to say that I'm also very nervous. At the time when we set up in good faith, we told, I can think of the likes of Ken Stevens, make sure, yeah, right, fair enough, we will keep it in a separate fund. And for this to come in the way it has, we haven't gone out for submissions or made it clear. If there is no advantage and we're going back on a promise, just on the sheer fact that we should stick to our promises, but enough reason to me.
Your Worship, could I explain the advantage? Because it obviously wasn't explained well enough. And I do need to explain something because there is an impact.
Righto, where, yes.
Okay, so what hasn't been explained well enough is that when the forestry investment was transferred into an investment, there was a whole set of rules attached to the disbursements. And those rules were not the same as the rules that you've applied for your main MECO account. So if we go right back to the resolution setting it up, it would, for example, I believe in a time of downturn, not allow any disbursement of rates to subsidise rates. What that means is that you cannot then use the equity of that account to subsidise the rates for the next year. And if you want to keep the same rates level of subsidy, which is the 840,000 we're talking about, Your Worship, it would require us dipping into the equity of the other main investment account to subsidise that, meaning the forestry account would not contribute to the 840,000. If you wanted to keep it exactly as per the rules, effectively what we are proposing and what we put in the budget is not changing the 840,000 rate subsidy for this next year, because the moment we change it, your rates go up, right? And so we were, as per the agreement that we discussed when we said we have a bad year investment, we would dip into the equity. But unfortunately, because we've got two rule sets for disbursements in good times and bad times, it would mean that the forestry account would stay with its rules and its equity wouldn't be touched. And that's fine, it's just a different set of rules. But you need to understand that your main investment account would be dipped into more than it would normally be doing so to make the 840,000. It would be 840,000 taken straight out of your main account. So the forestry one isn't touched. So I didn't explain that well enough in that sense. And the argument I was making was they're investments regardless. You know, the forestry were trees, they were turned into managed portfolio just as your internal debt was transferred into this. And we can separate it, so that's like Sidell, you've still got an account balance. So there's that administration side of things. And so I just want to raise that, that we need to go back to the resolutions, there's a different distribution rules, and we would need to be applying them for guaranteeing that 140,000. That's all I'm trying to say.
To me, Steve, that actually justifies the status quo, because if we've not only made a promise, but we'd also set rules up. And then the moment that if the rules don't set us, we change the rules. It's sort of further entrenches for me, but sorry, gang.
I just said what I was going to.
So I'm looking for a record, Councillor Cowley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, even I'm, through you, can I ask whether Chief Executive or John can explain to us what the rules are regarding money taken out of the forestry side of things, because I think quite a few of us here wouldn't, or you know, what that money to be spent on or how, because I'm sure if you're in the room that wouldn't really understand.
Well, Your Worship, there's no, in councillors, there's no difference to the other one in the sense of the money that was going to be taken out was to be for rate subsidy only. So that was the rule. But the point about the difference in the rules is that it was operating at different parameters. If the return is 0 or negative, there is no disbursement. So that was the rule, as opposed to the NECO, the main investment one, which we said is a long-term investment, and we want to guarantee the rate subsidy over time, so that's what we bank on. And that said, in a bad year of a negative return or a lower than budgeted return, we would take it out of equity. So that's the difference.
Thank you.
Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Worship. Look, I tend to agree with Councillor Bolweiler at this stage. I'm sitting here thinking to myself, what is the advantage of the status quo? And I can certainly see advantages with what's been presented to us, but I'm struggling with what the absolute advantage is with the status quo at the minute. So if somebody could explain that for me, that might help me a little bit.
The only reason, personally, Ken, is because we made a promise.
Yep, that's what I don't see.
That's the only thing. I'm not Councillor Finch.
Do we have to make the decision today?
I'm going to say yes, because it flows on to, we're going to
Yes.
know where we're taking it from,
Yeah.
isn't it? But we do need to know where that 840 is coming from.
Yeah.
Well, yes, Your Worship. As I said, I just threw it in there because when we were working through the figures, I remembered that there were different disbursement rules. I didn't want to get complicated. That's the only reason.
Councillor Ruderman.
Can I just ask the question, around the rules, there was so much went back into the forestry account and then the rest could go out, the 1% or whatever. So if we put it into the main account, does that rule still hold? Because at the moment we were guaranteeing that we're going to basically increase the amount of the forestry account before we disperse the extra. So if it goes into the main account and the rules in the main account are different, how do we guarantee that that investment goes back into the forestry account like we've promised it will? That's my concern. We put parameters around how that investment was to move on, and it is slightly different to the other. So if we merge it, can we guarantee that those rules would still apply?
As I take it, Alison, that's exactly what we're discussing. And we merge it and it doesn't.
Yeah, that is my concern.
Councillor Payne, followed by Bolweiler.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, I asked the question, what are the advantages of locking up that money? It's locking it up so we can't use it.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to be able to spend the money, Brian, to the advantage of the ratepayer in mind.
Can I just get a clarification before we move to Councillor Bolweiler? The net effect won't be changed because what we don't take out the forestry account, we just take more out the other. But it's whether it's coming out the left or the right hand pocket, you've still got the same amount of money coming out and our net equity doesn't change.
So the advantage of protecting the forest.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
It's a moral decision. Yeah.
Councillor Bolweiler.
So, it's a bit disturbing that a promise is, is made to a ratepayer by the mayor when it's a decision. It's really a decision should come back to the table around here rather than perhaps promised Ken Stevens at the time.
No, sorry.
But I'll just carry on anyway. But anyway. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought, but there's a table on page 45 of the agenda, which sort of sets out how we distribute the accounts. But one of we were invested in forestry to bring a benefit to the ratepayers of the district, and we never seem to be able to get that because for some reason we didn't do the harvesting and things like that. We didn't really look after our forestry asset as we should have done. So we can't just lock this funding up. We have to give a benefit back to the ratepayers. It can't just sit there forever accumulating more funds. So I think that it's there to bring a benefit. And okay, there will be times when it goes down a bit, but we should make that up again with better better economic times too with our investment. If we don't have the confidence to do that, to get back to that 5% budgeted return, then we shouldn't be investing the money at all.
So can I make a clarification, because I give the assurance to councillors that never ever would I make a promise as an individual that would entrench the council. From my memory, when we were setting up the forestry account, there was a guy Pearson, Ken Stevens, there's a guy that farms out there, for the life of me I can't remember his name, and they came and they asked, and council gave the assurance, not me, council when we set it up gave the assurance that we would keep the investment separate so that we'd always be able to follow it through. So I do want that made quite clear. I never ever give personal assurances.
Your Worship, can I just provide clarity so maybe you can shorten it a little bit? So we're clear on the promise. The promise was to separate it. Now that can still be achieved in the main Renewal account. So that's number one. Number two, you resolved the disbursement rules. That wasn't a promise, you resolved them. Those disbursement rules can change. It would change over time. You know, if you had 5 years of bad, you know, or 5 years of good, you're changing your disbursement rules. We've already changed them once for the main account that's been applied. You know, we said that we were going to go for a higher rate subsidy in the first few years and not return as much to the things. So your decisions on how you disperse it in good years and bad times, that's quite independent of the overriding promise to separate it. I hope to make that clear.
Councillor Lederman, followed by Cowan.
Could this be held over until, I mean, it was never discussed during the annual plan consultation or anything. Can it be held over to long-term plan consultation?
Absolutely.
Is there a decision on that?
As I took it, it can, because I suppose we just, if we do that, then the status quo remains until the long-term plan, and for this year we just take it out of one.
Yes, Your Worship. I'll also make the point, Councillor, that any decisions on these investments were never considered significant. Even the decision to, you know, move from trees and cut them down, we had this debate. It did not require consultation and wasn't considered significant because it was only a change of investment type, and we were clear on that. Even though we had some, you know, we had submissions and some people wanted to be involved in the process, we were clear that it was only a switch in investments.
So I'm going to go to Councillor Cowie. Oh, sorry, Councillor Graham, did you also hand up?
Did before.
Righto, so yeah, you're right, I did say Councillor Graham. So Councillor Graham followed by Cowie. Then if I see no first time hands up, I'm looking for a recommendation, please, to simply move this along.
Yeah, I'm a simple guy, didn't do too well at school cert maths. So if we have the forestry account and it doesn't return enough to disperse that amount of money, it's going to come out of the other one if they're merged. If they're merged into the two, if there isn't sufficient money, interest for the disbursement, it will come out of the other one. Is that right? Is that correct? But basically.
No, Your Worship, the rules would be the same. So by merging it, you effectively have the same disbursement rules, and you would be equally, you know, you were taking it out of each account.
So if they're merged, the money comes out of both accounts.
Yes.
So, which, yeah, no.
Well, with the answer, Councillor Graham?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if is that giving a false balance to the forestry account?
Well,
I know we end up giving out the same amount of money or whatever, and we don't lose money, but is that boosting the forestry account when it shouldn't? Or, as I said, I wasn't that great at adding numbers and that.
No, the investment account is made up of a number of different things. So we still have some depreciation reserve money in the investment account. And we still have SIDL in the investment account. We have unallocated in the investment account, and we have a different investment account for the forestry. So you would still have an investment account made up of a number of different contributing accounts. And if you're dispersing or removing, it would all be proportional.
Right, I'm going to move to Councillor Kelly and then I'm looking for a recommendation.
Well, I was prepared to recommendation if you were happy with that.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to move that it is merged.
Okay, do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Graham, matters open for discussion. From my part, look, I fully understand it's coming out of one pocket or the other, so it doesn't actually matter to the net investment and our equity. What worries me is that the people that came and spoke to us when we gave the assurance won't have a clue what we're doing today. And on our honour, we gave them an assurance. At the very least, you know, that means something to me. It means enough that I'll have to vote against it. A few hands gone up. Councillor Payne, followed by Sutherland Ludeman.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just wondering whether the recommendation needed a little bit more wording than that, because we have sat here and talked about how we identify that forestry investment within the whole thing. So I'm wondering whether the amendment needs a bit of an attachment to it just to signify that.
I always took it, Councillor Payne, whether it was merged or not. Let's say we did merge it, that forever and a day that Sir account would still be identified as like with Sir and what we've said. So that's it.
Yes, but Your Worship, you know, if for example it passed, the ratepayer or the person out there may not understand. So if you simply said merge or not merge forestry investment into the NICO investment account to be separately identified, something to be kept separately identified.
I'll just check with the mover and the seconder, which was seconder. Are you okay with that? Right, so that's the base for our discussion. So Councillor Payne was followed by Sutherland and Ludeman.
Pretty much the same kind of thing, but in 20 years when we're all not here, you know, it needs to be still the forestry account. You know, it could just kind of get lost in the corporate.
Councillor Ludeman.
Well, Warren, I will vote against it just because had there been more perhaps consultation around this and that it just didn't come to us, and I want to stick with what we promised those ratepayers at the time. It was a huge decision when we sold the forestry, and we promised the ratepayers at the time that we would do what we were doing, and it's not even 3 years since we made that promise. It's not like it's years ago. So at this stage, I can't.
Councillor Mulwiller.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to support the motion. We'll see, we've still got the Surdell account there. That's been there for well over 20 years now, and we've maintained and grown that in that time. So we will be doing that with the forestry account as well. It will still be maintained as a separate ledger item. One of the other benefits though is that when it comes to reporting, it's going to be a lot more simple too. There's only going to be one table that when it comes to the investment report. So that is one of the benefits that I can see as well. It's just to make our life a bit easier too. But we're still going to have the separate ledger items, and perhaps I'd like to see that come back before we make our final, like everything in, is just to get those investment account amounts, sort of end-year investment account amounts for all the depreciation accounts and such like, just to see what we expect those to be at our meeting at, in June, mid-June, I think. Do that just so we know where we are with things. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Graham. Yes, you can. You can move it.
I just wonder if, are we actually, because we're keeping it separate, are we actually breaking a promise? I think we just might be, I'm not sure we are.
Okay. If there's no further debate on the matter. Oh, sorry, Councillor Kelly.
So, this is the final word. I mean,
That is now.
we've had a fair yarn about it, so that's why I moved so we make some headway. But and I agree with Councillor Boyle's sentiments about the management of the whole thing. I have a bit of a concern though that this promise seems to be floated around the room. I'm not quite sure as a council we made decisions. Probably one of the best decisions we did actually make was selling the forestry because we weren't very good at looking after it. And so to me, it's you make a decision and you move on, and we won't always agree with the decision. And we've made decisions here that I certainly don't agree with. But look, we're here for the greater good, and that's why I was happy to move the way I did.
Thank you for that, Councillor Carey. That brings the debate to an end. Put it to the vote. Can I please have a show of hands as well? So all those in favour, say aye, raise your hands.
Aye. 6, 7, 8, your wish.
All those against, say nay, raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, your wish.
Motion's carried. Do anyone want their vote recorded?
Yes, please.
So can we just have a hold there? We've got Councillor Wilkinson, Catherwood, Ludeman, Sutherland, and Councillor Kennedy. So Councillor Kennedy and Councillor Herbert wish to have their votes recorded. And some were voting both ways. Only the against. Everyone that wants their vote recorded.
That would like their
You only get your vote recorded if you were against. It was 8-7, but to the people that want their vote recorded, I was picking one of the hands at least had gone up for a vote for. So all the ones that want their vote recorded were against? No. Sorry, as you were. So those votes are recorded.
Oh, sorry, must be 8-6.
No, it's 15.
What, you voted?
Yeah, I voted.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm mistaken.
Please note whoever's taken up that Councillor Ludeman's left the room. We go to the second, number B, the budgeted investment return reduces to 3%. Matters open for discussion. Councillor Catherwood.
Just maybe table to John, just an update of where the investment is at last week, possibly. I know we had a big hit in March, but I know there's been a turn in April on the upward slope, just so there's an idea of where we're at.
John, do you have
Yes, I'm just, yes, Your Worship, I'm just trying to call that up quickly. We had, it was close to 6%. At the end of April.
So was that from March?
1 month.
1 month.
Just in one, yeah. Compared to the low that we had to the end of March, because that was our cutoff for reviewing things. So, yeah, we went up 5.6% just in 1 month. That's just really the market turning around. It's not really at the highest levels it's been, but it's in the right direction. That's why we went for a conservative return, because we didn't know what the market would do in the next year.
Okay, everyone, if there's no one has any further questions, is someone prepared to move Councillor Finch that the budget investment return reduces to 3%? Can I please have a second? Second with Councillor Wilkinson. Any further discussion? Put to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. And next one is that the rate subsidy for the 2020-21 year is confirmed at 840,101.
Yes, Your Worship, just this just is the point where if your budget investment return is 3%, it won't be 840,000. So it'll be less than that, which would a increase in rates as a consequence of reducing the subsidy. So what we are again proposing is that we're locking in, as we have done for the last 2 years anyway, that amount of rate subsidy. Because the moment you change that rate subsidy, you'll increase rates. So again, that's equivalent to about 5%, which is how we've budgeted in the past. So if we achieve 5% or more, we are going to be fine. If not, again, would be a slight requirement to use equity. But The only other option you do is you sort of do a reaction that changes every single year. There's no stability to rate subsidy by going up and down, and so that markedly affects your rates, and you don't really want to do that, which is why we are proposing that we should always be locking in that figure that we bank on, and we either overachieve or we underachieve and make it up. That's the principle we've been applying.
Yes. So it's just a flow-on effect. Any questions, councillors? Or can we please note also Councillor Ludeman's come back into the room? Just not sorry, Senate video. Awesome, thank you. So discussion, councillors? Someone prepared to move it? Councillor Bolwell, seconded by Catherwood. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Thank you. Our next one is the late payment penalty that we're budgeting to reduce by 36,000.
Your Worship, perhaps we could do D&E. We've just done some reflection. We're not saying it's a perfect estimate. We feel that there needs to be a reflection. Local government and Solgum have provided some advice around these things will reduce. We feel that we need to show some reduction because that's what we believe is going to be the case. But we can't say this is a great estimate. But it's better than having your budgets remaining the same and then finding that there's a problem with deficit at the end as a consequence. So these are just minor reflections of a direction. We're not guaranteeing necessarily that we will make or not those figures. So D&E, which I just...
So they're both of the same ilk, aren't they? So I'll take them both. Councillor Finch.
Thank you. I think this is a start. It's really good. It's good message to get out to people, and I'm completely in favour of it.
I was just wondering if any staff have an update. I know that I talked to Pauline a good month ago, and at that point we certainly weren't getting any indication that there was going to be, we weren't getting inundated on it at that point. Is that still the case? That all quiet's on the Western Front as such?
Jules is going to stand up.
Jules.
Through you, Your Worship, we have been contacted by a lessee of one of our camping grounds that's indicated that while they're up to date at the moment, they're projecting a lot lower income coming forward. The indication was if it was a ground-only lease, it probably wouldn't be so bad, but because it's for the full lease cost, they will be intending to be struggling for at least some time, but weren't quite sure exactly how long that would be.
Sharon has read some up.
Sharon?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. Pauline has also been contacted by a couple of lessees of our commercial properties who have actually stopped their rental at this point. And once they get up and running, they're going to get back in discussion with her about how they proceed going forward. And there's been a minimal amount of queries so far about rates, but we're sort of expecting as people start coming out of this that we'll get a bit more information on that.
Thank you. Any questions, discussion, councillors? Is someone prepared to move? Yeah. Both Councillor Finch, thank you. So both D and E have been moved by Councillor Finch. Can I have a seconder, please? Seconded, Councillor Foster. Any further discussion? Councillor
Thank you, Worship. Look, I totally support this. I think this actually is the one thing that we do need, like Councillor Finch. It gives us the tools to actually support the people that need it. That's how I'm reading this.
Your Worship, I think clarity, we're just confusing what it is. All we're doing is saying that we're not receiving the money, so the budget needs to drop. Right. It's not a decision to reduce the penalty fees or anything like that. That's a different decision further down. This is just saying we think we're going to, we're not going to receive as much money in anyway, and that. So that's all it's budget. Further down, you make other decisions.
Okay, so I'm going to put it to the vote. I can't see any hands up, so I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Thank you. Moving on to our trade waste, which is similar in its intent in the fact that we're trying to target where the need arises. As we're all aware, the trade waste, we were in the process of changing it, and now it's suggested that possibly in light of COVID we defer it for 12 months. That is open for discussion. Councillor Catherwood.
Yeah, I'm in favour of a deferral. Just from the last workshop we picked up. I know we've got a bugbear over sale yard waste going, well, your truck washers and stuff going into our domestic sewage schemes, and they've been consented. I think that issue needs to be tidied up before council goes out to those affected parties. Consent process out before we're putting that sewage into our domestic sewage schemes. I just prefer a deferral.
So deferred. Thank you, Councillor Catherwood. Any further discussion? Sorry, Councillor Graham, I've forgotten. So Councillor Graham, followed by Councillor Wheeler.
So is the projected income or something from this, the charging, is that budgeted for, like, if we defer it, is it going to cost us anything? Or, yeah, because I'd take it that the charging would be to cover the costs of implementing it and the cost to the plant.
Yeah, there's two answers to that. One is we didn't actually budget for it. It's in the report. We didn't budget for the income from the new fees. So that means you have on that side of the question, you know, the complete freedom. You're not losing anything as a consequence. On the other, which is the more principle-based part of it, you know, the whole idea of the charging regime was to, you know, to pay and, you know, put the user pays for putting the cost to where it belongs. And so that wouldn't happen as a consequence. But in a budget sense, it makes no difference.
Followed by Ludeman. Sorry, Councillor Wheeler, followed by Finch.
Thank you, Worship. Generally, I'm in favour of deferring for a year. I've just had a look and see that for our Category 2 domestic equivalent high volume, our large retailer was going to go from $462 per year to $6,000, nearly $7,000. A campground, there's more than doubling. Cafes from $462.60 to $1,600, nearly $1,700 a year. But these are probably the businesses that have been most affected by the shutdown. So I think it would be fair to defer them. The only question I do have is we've got the stock sale yards, which we're just paying $462 a year, opposed to cost to go up to $21,000 a year. And also large health facility go from just a domestic, ordinary domestic of $462 to $2,000 odd. Now their income probably has not been affected, and that they do contribute markedly to what goes into our sewage scheme. So whether we separate out some of those or just make a blanket deferral for everything, which is probably the easier thing to do. But generally, I'll be in favour of a deferral for 12 months before we start these charging.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. So we've got Councillor Finch, Ludeman, Catherwood.
Thank you. That was my question, was going to be, is it going to be a year or 6 months? Because I would prefer a year, because it's going to take them a long time to recover.
Ludeman.
I support deferring it for 12 months. I think we need to be said to be supporting businesses that have definitely been affected by the lockdown, and this is showing some faith. So support deferring.
Thank you, Councillor Catherwood.
Yeah, just reminding myself as to why I prefer a deferral for 12 months. Also, was the lack of submissions. I'm not sure if it's been communicated to the affected businesses correctly of what potentially charges they could have been implied going forward. So, yeah, with a lack of submissions, you're talking quite substantial amounts of money affecting certain small businesses, or lots of businesses, in fact. Yeah, that's another reason why I decided I wanted to support it.
Thank you. So I'm only getting one-way traffic here, so I'm looking for a recommendation, please. Councillor Wheeler.
Sorry, I'll just have to go back to recommendations there, but
Sorry, the trade waste charging regime be deferred for 12 months, and then we cross out or A.
Yes, so that's my recommendation, a motion. I'll have to move that we defer the regime for 12 months. Yep.
Seconded by Councillor, moved by Councillor Boyle, seconded by Councillor Finch. Any last discussion? Put to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Our next one is the lease rentals and cable codes.
I tell you, Worship, this is similar in that sense, other than the fact that it does, there's a difference, and it's not proposing, for example, 12 months. It's more limited to potentially the level shifts that you can think about. We know that some of our premises have already decided for themselves, not that we've approved it, to not pay their leases at this point. So this will make a decision on those basings. It does give us an ability. I did say that decisions at least through till end of June only impact on this financial year, so it'll get lost in the surplus deficit situation. There's not enough time to, and it's not significant in dollar cents if you chose to go down this pathway and confine to this year. It's a different question again, which I think is for subsequent discussions around what do you do for the rest of the year for COVID-19 responses, which is a different approach down the end of the agenda. I'm looking for this one for you to give direction to staff. We might say level 3, 2, or 1, or you just might say keep it simple, go to the 30th of June for it. So that's all we're saying, Your Worship. We've got a table there, and it's we just know it's an issue, and we just need a direction from you.
For me, we transition now from being a council to, this is we're a landlord. And I know that when we had the shock during the global financial crisis, my landlord came and saw me one day and I said, hey, times have changed. The wind's blowing on my face. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll halve your lease. And the psychological was just like, oh, I am going to make it. So to me, it's, do we want to be a mercenary landlord and go to the ones that hit pretty blooming hard and be a mercenary landlord and be known as a mercenary landlord, or are we an understanding landlord? I don't frequent hairdressers, but I know that 2 to 4 Elizabeth Street is a hairdresser that won't have been open for one haircut in the last 2 or so months. So my thoughts were that the top 3, we could waive it for 3 months, and then for the camping grounds, probably the hairdressers opens today, I suppose, and let's hope that things are fair up and charging. Might not be the same for the camping ground, so I take the first 3 different, waiver them because they've been shut, so just waiver it for 3 months. But I fear that the camping grounds might have this in there. The wind's going to be blowing against them for a longer period. And I wondered if we did the same as what my landlord had done and said, we'll meet you halfway. It's my opening salvo. Got a few hands up anyway, so I'll just go there. We'll go up the line and then up this line. Councillor Finch.
My question was Ross Place and Skerry Street, Clinton, what are they, please?
I know what Ross Place is. That's just a retail place in Lawrence on the main street. Some sort of gallery art.
Goods, yeah. Yeah.
It hasn't been open.
And the Clinton one?
Sharon might be able to help us on that one. Is that I think is it behind the community centre?
Yes, Steve, that's correct. It's Tony Holden's got one of our sheds in behind the community centre in Clinton.
To do what, and do you know?
I think he's a mechanic, is he? I'm not too sure what he does there.
It's a contracting business.
Contracting business.
So that would have been still going.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, Worship. Can I just ask a couple of questions, please? It says there rental and outgoings, and it's just got rates as outgoings. What about insurance? Who insures the building?
No, we don't. So we
don't insure our own building.
Well, sorry.
That surprises me.
No, so sorry. There will be. You're right. Sorry. Insurance, yes. We haven't included that. Although you assume that. Sharon, I might defer to you. I'm assuming that it would be charged by the lease, but we'll see if it was separately charged.
Oh, look, my attitude to this is everyone's got to play their part. the country finds itself in uncharted territories, and to help these people through, we help them through. I'd like to know, it's really hard to make a decision on this unless you actually look at a particular lease. And for someone to ring up and say they're not paying their lease at all, depending on the lease, is actually illegal. I'm presuming they'll be an Auckland Law Society lease. They're pretty standard. So they're using 27.5, which is actually, in my opinion, I'm happy to go 50% for the rental, but I would leave the rates and insurances as outgoings and be paid in full, because they are actually cost to us.
Thank you for that, John. Councillor Graham, followed by Payne.
Yeah, I'm quite keen on particularly Councillor says. I'm reflecting on reading that Clutha leader this morning where council are doing nothing. 10% of the mayor's income over 6 months or a year, so over 6 months is pretty pitiful apparently. This year would, this and the previous resolution would do a lot to, I don't know, I wouldn't make good English at school, is it really?
Some messaging out there.
Actually, I don't know why I went to school. It would make me feel better, I suppose, put in basic.
It's quite frustrating, isn't it, Councillor Graham, that everyone throws stones at us before we can even sit in this room and make the decisions. That's the frustrating thing, but I haven't read the Clutha leader, but no doubt they've matched me dollar for dollar, have they?
This is Linklater, is it? Or?
Yeah, it's fine. It's great, dollar for dollar. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Worship. I didn't have my hand up, but anyway, I'll take the moment. Yeah, I'm not the same wavelength as pretty much what's going around the room, except I think it's been clearly identified already that maybe we have got to screen these people somewhere down the track and just work out who's deserving and who isn't. Because, clearly, there's one there that I've just heard of I don't think would have been stopped for 1 minute. So,
yeah, I'm with you on that now. So, I will go to Ali and then I'll go to Dane. Sorry, I will go to Councillor Ludeman, followed by Councillor
Councillor Thompson was first.
Sorry, Councillor Thompson. This setting isn't right because I cannot see you when you.
My question's pretty much been answered, thank you, and that was the whereabouts of that property in Clinton. And yes, Tony Holden has been working through the lockdown.
Councillor Ludeman.
So that probably follows on to what my discussion is, that these are very much a one by one, probably individual case, and perhaps goes to our rates policies or something like that. I mean, I'm supportive of helping them with this quarter that we're in now with their rates. I'm quite supportive of that, although I'm not supportive of the one, who've been operating. But if they can prove that they haven't been operating, and I mean, and I would even say that to some of the camping grounds who may have been actually doing quite well with workers' accommodation and stuff. So that's why it is definitely a case-by-case basis. And I don't actually know that we've got enough information here to make a call on every one of these today. So that would, I mean, I am supportive of those that have been not working to suspend their rates for this quarter, but actually we would need proof that they have had of their income, just like you have had to for the government wage subsidy and stuff. They've had to show 30% reduction in their income, and I think we need to. I mean, look, I know it's been tough, and some of them will have totally been affected, but it is a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I tried to break it into two categories. I can see that there's 3, maybe 3.5. We will go down through them in a minute. We will. My apologies, because it was that quantum one that I thought I knew what the building was, and I didn't.
Your Worship, could I just make it clear that we weren't proposing anything to do with the rates, because that's a different proposal. So the rates wasn't going to be. We were just talking about the.
It says outgoings.
Yeah, that's just the table, but in the text, I'm fairly sure we said the rating side of things was to be looked at by your decisions in future papers, because rates postponement and payment plans are all available. So we weren't suggesting the rates, we were just asking about the rental or the lease itself. That's one clarity. And the other one is just simply, it's I'd probably caution about, if you don't want to make a decision about an individual because not enough information today, I'd certainly want to suggest that you either gave somebody the authority to do, to reduce it based on evidence, whether it's myself or whether it's the mayor or somebody else you want to give the authority, just so that we can then deal with those parties.
Councillor Catherwood, followed by Cowie, and then I'm going to push the issue along.
Yeah, so they are pretty much individual cases. I totally agree with on that one. I would be happy on the level 4 and 3 if there was a 50% reduction on those that are affected. But now we're into level 2, businesses can open, and I've got to be careful as such. The privateers, the competing businesses that are out there with their mortgages, they might get a mortgage holiday, but it still gets tacked on to the end. So they're getting no compensation. And they've had the central government compensation that's available to everyone, leaseholders and not. We don't want to be too generous because their competitors might be in a completely different financial situation. Just be aware of that.
Yeah, so I'm going to go to Councillor Cowie, and then I'm going down through the list, and we'll bring this to a head.
Thank you. Look, I'm just reading there, and it says, I think we should only be discussing, and obviously, but some have notified they've stopped paying their rent because they can't operate. But to me, they're the only ones we should be discussing. And then we look at whatever sort of reduction in rent.
I'll take it that will flow out the vote, Stuart, if that's what council wants to do. But to bring it to a head, I'm gonna roll with the individual ones, and I'll start with the hairdressers. Sorry, Bruce, I did say that we're going to bring it to the head, and there will be time for discussion. But if we can, please go down through and try and get some direction here. And the first one, can we focus on is the hairdressers beside the plaza. You all know where 2 to 4 Elizabeth Street, Clutha is, Councillor Bolwheeler.
Yes, can I ask if they stopped paying their rate of rent?
Can I just put a hold on that? Is that a private matter for them? It's been said generically that they are.
It's been raised publicly already, sorry, so we've already mentioned that. But I mean, any communication they have with us might be subject to public information anyway. So the answer is yes.
Just in that case, just for the ease of dealing with this, I would suggest that perhaps we just remit that rent for 1 quarter to the end of June, rather than try and fiddle about trying to decide where we went into level 4 and level 3. So basically, from the 1st of April to the 30th of June, any rent remissions, reductions, just
we waiver them, is what you're saying? What do you want? We're not tagging them on to next month, they just die.
no.
What are you saying?
Yeah, just for that one.
For the 1 quarter.
Basically.
So $2,024.
That's Monday.
No,
It's 6,000.
Oh yeah, for 3 months, doesn't it? Yep.
Your Worship, I just wonder, we could spend a lot of time on this, and I know we've...
Yeah, I know.
It's difficult with it being individualised and things like that. I just wonder, for the sake of where you might be heading, whether or not council would be more comfortable to just finish it potentially by saying that, that you're in principle supportive of business, supporting businesses for the monthly rental where they have been impacted by COVID-19. And then until they are operating, and leave that to yourself or myself. I don't mind either way, if you're comfortable with the political side rather, and just let that happen, and then it allows us to move on relatively quickly, and you can deal with the individual cases.
For me, it's administrative, and I would, sorry, Steve, I don't want to throw it on you, but it is administrative. And when we said affected by, do we do it similar to what the government has done, where 30% reduction of business for that month means you're qualified?
Yeah.
Because I've been affected, or no, I haven't. It's subjective then, whereas we quantify.
I'm happy to move that, I said.
So I'm sorry, there are heads up, but there's now a mover, so I'll take the mover, but I need a seconder so that the discussion can be seconded, Councillor Wilkinson. Now, can I go back, Councillor Sutherland, then Councillor Luke?
Sorry, I'm for it too, but do we need to know if they've gone to the government and got extra money? Because they're 30% less in there.
That would be the analysis. So
I think we need all those kind of things to come in.
That's what Steve would be doing. Councillor Luke.
I'm very much supportive of this going through staff. They're all personal individuals, and it needs to be dealt with in that respect. But take into account, you know, the 30% reduction, just like government has done, and over the months that they're closed, and so that kind of direction, which I'm sure is what we would do. But definitely, yeah, that would be how I would support it.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, followed by Wheeler.
Just a couple of questions that I'm sort of asking myself here. Our Clutha camping ground has long-term tenants, so no doubt they have carried on with their income. And the notes say that the leases don't include crib rentals, but those people weren't able to visit their holiday homes either. So technically, they weren't able to use them either.
As I took it, Joe, the proportion between permanents and tourists is going to be in the 30% or the criteria that Steve's going to be looking at.
Just to answer your question, it was just too much. Like it was going to be, if we throw another table with all these, it'd be another load of complications. So what we were suggesting is that further down in your decision making, there's a different option as to whether or not you want to put some money aside for other flexible decision making. And so, we didn't go down that pathway to discuss that.
So sorry, have you got more, Councillor Thompson?
I just wanted to ask, does anyone know how many permanent residents were at the camping ground?
I was talking to someone who works there, and she said they're full. That was yesterday.
I can confirm that. I've had a bit of time around there lately too, and
so that'll be picked up.
They'll be missing the tourist income, but they certainly have a lot of tenants permanent in their camping ground. And it blew me away. I had to walk up to one of them and ask, what he's all up to on holiday. Yeah. No, I wasn't. I was 2 or 3 hours away.
Order, please, guys. That's going to be picked up when our CEO goes through. I'm getting pretty much the theme is in one direction. If I'll go to Councillor Herbert, but then if there's no then we'll be looking for someone with a counter proposal.
Thank you. Just before that last comment, I thought it was quite simple that we were overcomplicating it, and it was really a landlord and tenant discussion. And I'm not that interested whether they've applied for other government money or whatever. Those avenues are out there for everybody. So, and this is a landlord and tenant discussion for me. But I'd like to know whether staff need some direction from us around whether they're allowed 50% reduction, 100% reduction, and what the time is. Are we talking if they come to you and they qualify, they get 100% reduction? Or are we talking 50%, or what are we actually talking?
Of their rental.
Yeah, of their rental. We're talking, if the staff have got discretion, have they got discretion over the total amount?
Yeah, so unless, through your worship, unless you just said...
That's why I'm asking. I mean,
I took it that it was full.
Yeah. So full, so no rent, possibly no rent for May and June.
Possibly is the question. So, but it could be anything to...
I would propose 50%.
No reduction. But it's up to you if you want to put a limit.
I would put in there 50%.
Can I just take it, John, the mover and the seconder were at 100%, and consequently you would vote accordingly when the vote comes through, and then if it's one, you would make it.
So just clarifying, the mover and seconder would say give authority up to 100% remittal of rental. And if you had a different view, you'd be saying up to 50%.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
So that will come through with the vote, John, or you could do an amendment.
I'm happy to move an amendment to that, actually. And the reason being that, look, everyone's got to play their part in this, and we as a landlord play our part, and that is 50% reduction. I think 100% reduction, you've got nowhere to go after that. This thing could pop up again. You've actually got no room to go after that. When you go to zero, you're at the bottom of the pile. 50% is a goodwill gesture, and I think we're playing our part.
Okay, so I've got to move it to the amendment, and I have a seconder to the amendment. So we will now discuss the amendment. If there is no discussion, we will vote on the amendment. All those, so is it quite clear first? I should make it quite clear that the amendment is saying 50% is the maximum, but it could be from 0 to 50%. That's what you meant, John?
Yeah.
So up to 50% is the amendment. So we'll vote on that. All those in favour, please say aye and raise your hands.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, your worship.
Those against?
5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, your worship.
Does any of the against want their vote recorded?
Yes, please.
Recorded of Councillor Finch's
Oh, it's
vote.
not the severe extent of your
Yeah, that's a point 2. So now the amendment becomes the substantive motion. We will vote on it again. Does anyone have any discussion before we put this to the vote?
Sorry.
Did you move or second?
I'd had nothing.
No, so that's right, sorry.
Just a question. I'd just like the motion read out. The wording of the motion, please, so we know exactly what we're voting on.
So verbally, the motion would now be that council gives the chief executive authority to negotiate rental by up to a 50% reduction for COVID-19 impacts.
Okay. Councillor Foster.
And can we also offer a deferred payment plan
Oh, we would anyway.
on that one? Okay.
Yes, so that's an existing option we would.
So this now is the substantive motion. Is there any further discussion before we put to the vote? Once again, can we please raise hands and say aye?
Aye.
Keep it up, please, Bruce, while there is lots. Did you get there more?
No, I don't need to.
Don't need to. Oh, yeah, you're dead right. We've done it. And those against, please raise your hand and say nay.
1, 2, 3.
And does any of the nays want their vote recorded? This time, Councillor Finch gets her vote recorded, but the motion is passed. Thank you for that.
Just ask a question, please. The leases don't include the crib rentals. The cribs aren't actual businesses. I know they can't go there and have their holiday time, and I sympathise with them over that, but they're not actually losing money unless they're renting them out full time.
Agreed. Righto, team, let's push this along. Our next one is the salary budget wage freeze reduction to be confirmed is 181,000. Steve, did you have anything that you wish to add to that? It sounded I think you're for the salary budget freeze.
Oh, I've written down what it is, the worship. Taken it through the staff and been very, very supportive.
That is open for discussion. Sorry, Councillor Finch.
Thank you. I'd just like to move a big vote of thanks to the staff that they are supporting this. I think that's really very good of them, and they are going with the flow of thinking of all those that have been affected, including them themselves. And thank you for putting it together, Steve. And yeah, I'd like to move that we do definitely do that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Seconded by Councillor Foster, is it? Oh, sorry, seconded please by someone, and then we'll have a discussion. Seconded by Councillor Herbert. Councillor Foster, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question about the statement saying all positions are fulfilled. It was just to get an update from Steve on how many positions are vacant at the moment.
I think we've only got 2 or 3. This is just off the top of my head, I'm sorry. If you're approving the budget, then there's the additional position for the potential additional positions within the budget for the transportation manager, and the question as to whether or not we go with the community plan implementation manager. So at the moment there's 3 there. We put on hold the community plan position until you make a decision on community plans, and again, we haven't started recruiting for the transportation manager yet, depending on the budget. So.
Thank you for that. If there's no discussion, Councillor Mawela.
Thank you, Your Worship. very much supportive of the motion there. I do thank staff and the Chief Executive for coming to that decision. I just wonder whether there's been any update from the Remuneration Authority regarding elected representatives' remuneration for the next year.
The latest one I heard was that the government sent it back to the commission. So the government weren't prepared to make a stand, and the commission has indicated that all the political sides, we won't be getting any increase for the next year, but as far as I take it, they weren't going to be doing reductions that have been discussed. So it's a wage freeze. It's the same as the staff. Councillor Graham.
Having been a union delegate, I sort of choked a bit when I read that, but now that I'm not, I think it's a good move and highly commended.
Right, team, I'm going to put it to the vote, please. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Thank you for that. And Steve, can you please pass on to staff our appreciation? Internal rate of return is confirmed at 2.05%.
I think it's Your Worship.
Yep, I take it as, and actually I might do the next one as well, that we do the rural water schemes and the internal rate. They seem to me to be pretty straightforward ones.
Sorry, Your Worship, they're not quite straightforward. So the first one is...
I'm trying to move things along here.
Well, it's just an explanation, just to make sure.
Yeah, right.
Happy to move that the rates confirmed 2.05.
Okay, so we'll just do it separately, 2.05%. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Sutherland. Any discussion? Put to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? This time, rural water scheme rates.
Yes, so Your Worship, the only issue with this is that in the past, where you made decisions that might have changes to the rural water schemes that generally haven't been applied because the schemes have already decided on, the impact for them, and they wouldn't, for example, in the past be dropping their rates. They would tend to keep their rates there. So something like the salary budget wage freeze, which has a proportion that will apply to the rural water schemes as it flows through the organisation. If you don't direct that it applies, then actually reduce the rate, you lose the benefit of the whole reduction as it applies to that. So I just want to make it clear that you were making a decision to flow it through to the rural water schemes as well, so that it does flow.
And every other part of the organisation, isn't it? But
well, they're the only ones that get the one stage.
Pretty straightforward team. Councillor Valwela.
Just a question then, have we got an indication then of what effect that will have on some of those rural water scheme rates?
Probably haven't got, it's been difficult enough to flow it through to try to figure out the what can impact for the all the rates. So the problem is, yes we can, but we can't do it today for you. We can't even do the flow through of the wages. So when you see that we're looking at the spreadsheet, the live spreadsheet of the changes, we're going to see the impact of your decisions on the 2.63, and you'll see the rating example changes. But because the wages flow through for overheads to every single thing, it's just too difficult to do that, and the same will apply to the rural water schemes, I understand. So we will understand that there will be a reduction proportionately or relatively small to it, but I don't believe you'll see the physical rates as you would see for the rating examples, and you certainly won't see the rating examples with the 181,000 off it as well flowing through, because that's too difficult to do.
Councillor Harper.
Just a comment. Well, I'm presuming we'll see that flow through the budgets for the rural water schemes by way of the shared overhead expenses.
Yes.
I don't think you'll see a reduction. You'll just see the increase won't be quite as high then. Well, they are facing some major increases. So it's a reduction's quite a kind word. That's all.
Yeah, for that component.
It'll be less of an increase.
So I'm going to push this along. I need someone to please move number J. Councillor Valwela, seconded Councillor Ludeman. No further discussion. Put to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Thank you. I'm now going to adjourn the meeting for morning smoko, but before we go, obviously there's some rules to face, so we've got them enforced, so we've put the meanest hombre in the building, in charge of making sure councillors. So Justine, do you want to run through the House rules and the procedure, the implications of someone dare crosses you?
Okay, so we can fly through what's the one start with. So, well, technically the one-way system goes past reception, doesn't it, Steve?
Yes.
Yeah, it goes round the long.
Round the long way, come back along the tea trolley is on the other side of this wall. Everyone can just keep, and that's only for councillors. Keep the same way flow and back through the kitchen. And no stopping in the kitchen unless you absolutely need to. Definitely no more than 2 people. And there's hand sanitizer at the entry of the staff room.
So can we be quite clear here that actually as soon as we walk out of this room, we're into the staff workspace, we're into their bubble. So it's not time to concertina up or go and have a bit of a back slap and a chin wag. We're in out round and we're back in, and please don't concertina up on ourselves. Because there was comments the last time that in the staff workspace, we all went in there for lunch, sat shoulder to shoulder, and didn't really care about their environment. So we won't be doing that this time.
Is this based on an age thing? Seniority?
What time are we back, Brian?
And then I think it's Bruce. Justine wanted to know that.
Yes, yeah, still be toilets, will still be.
Yeah, so we'll double the other side.
Just before the next, but can I make sure that the minutes are now still being recorded? And Larissa, are you there?
Yeah, the recording back on.
That's all that matters.
Yeah, sorry, the sound hadn't been on from our end for them, so it's on now.
You guys were muted.
Oh. For how long? Who do we blame? Okay then, Jules, I have got a few hands up and Councillor Graham has already spoken, but is there anything you wish to add to your report?
Sorry, it's just reloading because we didn't know you guys had restarted.
I'll keep going with questions, Jules, but the opportunity is there, but you'll have to call out because I'm not looking behind me too much.
No, I'll tell you that.
Thank you. So there were hands up. Councillor Ludeman.
I guess my question is when will we get the full details? Like it's coming back to council for approval to work to happen. It's obvious that it's urgent for some of this work to happen. So I'm kind of asking, you know, when can we expect this? Because I mean, I do think we need to be seen by our ratepayers to be getting on that sort of.
Steve, do you have a time frame? Jules.
So there is work already planned and underway and being priced for this compliance work. The Clutha water treatment plant has had the tick for being fully compliant for protozoan compliance, and there is work planned and already being priced for Owaka and Kaitangata to be compliant. So that work will produce a summary of what's planned in the next service delivery report, and the compliance plans for the other plants will be coming forward as well. It's just being priced. It's been scoped and is underway pending budget approval.
Thank you, Jules, because all we're actually doing here is recognising that we have an issue and we have to put budgetary figures to deal with it. So I did see other hands, but if there are no other hands, we've got 2 recommendations I'm prepared to take as one. Councillor Finch has been moving, Councillor Ludeman is seconding. Any further discussion? Put it to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. Those against. Thank you. Right, over to the Rosebank office upgrade and roof renewal, where I notice we've got some approves or do not approves. Who did it? Jules, once again, do you have anything you wish to add to your report?
I think we'll take it as read, Your Worship, through you. Obviously, there are some significant changes there once the full scope of the work has been identified. And the other key change is the roof renewal, which is for about 2/3 of the Rosebank offices there, was identified previously, but at a lot lower cost, and has now been fully costed out, including asbestos removal and all of those requirements. So it is a significant increase in terms of that. The only point I'd like to note, which is in the report, is it can be deferred, and however, it probably can only be deferred for potentially 3 to 5 years.
That's just the roof you're talking about, Joel?
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
But wasn't it said that if we did defer it for 3 to 5 years and it didn't work in with the overall program that we've got on the go at the moment, there'd be cost increases?
Yes, there will, through you, Your Worship, as we will have to cut into the existing asbestos roof to extend the new proposed meeting rooms and make that good, and then come back and when we do the full roof renewal, we'll have to rip the whole roof off and replace the whole roof.
Okay, councillors, matters open for discussion. Councillor Mulwilly.
To me, Your Worship, it makes sense to do the whole thing at once. Seems to be a much more efficient way to do it. Get the whole job done at once. If that roof renewals, while it can be deferred for a short time, it's something that's going to happen. So my thoughts are all the work should be done at once, the upgrades and the roof renewal. Just a question, this present building, what is it, 40 years old, I suppose, 50 years old, and it's probably not very energy efficient. I've been presuming there'll be some energy efficiency, some cost savings to come with the operational side with it, the energy efficiency, perhaps lighting upgrades and things like that, which make it more economical to run. So just as that sort of a factor in some of the upgrades.
Jules can answer that. I think we've done quite a bit of work around what we can do within the structures and what is necessary within the structures, because we know we don't have good, it's not just this room, as you know well. We don't have a good system now, which we do need to. So Jules?
So yes, we would certainly be looking to put more energy efficient heating sources in. That would be heat pumps rather than direct heating, which will save some money. There is existing insulation in the roof, so we're not going to make a huge gain there, but it's certainly looking to make it a lot more comfortable and more energy efficient in terms of how we operate the whole building. There are a number of heat pumps already in some parts of the building, but it's the older main area of the building which would benefit from a more efficient heating system.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is, can the upgrade be deferred for 12 months? Is there work that must be done urgently over the next year, or can the whole program wait?
So I can answer that, Your Worship. It certainly could be deferred. We have identified that it doesn't have a rating impact next year. So the way we do things, as you know, is you cost it in 1 year, you spend it in 1 year, and it doesn't get charged to the subsequent year. So deferring, if you are thinking about a rating impact as a consequence of deferral on next year, it makes no difference. If you are thinking of deferring for any other reason that you wish, all we're doing is shifting the rating impact another year out. So it has no rating impact in next year.
Councillor Herbert, followed by Payne,
Thank you,
Cowie, Graham.
I've got no problem with the heating, it's actually quite high over here. I might turn it down if I can find a switch. But look, this would be nice to have, but it's not a necessity. And I think, and I understand what Steve's saying. We all know that the loan funding comes in a year after the project's completed or what have you. But as a show of good faith to our ratepayers, I think we can make do with what we've got. And can I suggest that, and I'm not picking holes in anything, but walking in this morning, it looked like there's a lot of moss, gutters could do with cleaned out, and trees could be cut off and just keep things a little bit better maintained. I would, going along with what's been said already, that if we could defer this for 12 months, as a perception to the people out there, it's a show of good faith.
Councillor Payne, Cowie, Graham.
Yeah, I'm interested in the discussion. I find myself concurring with Councillor Mulwilly all the time today, but I believe there's probably never been history will tell us that there's never a cheaper time to do it than right now. That's one consideration. And I do believe it's common sense to do the whole lot of it in one hit. Let's not do half the roof and then come back and have another crack at it later on. And unlike Councillor Herbert, I actually believe this will help the situation locally, because I believe enabling people to help themselves will get through this crisis that we're in, and actually having builders on site and employing local people, it actually helps out. It'll give some economic benefit to the district as well. So that's my point of view. Thank you.
Councillor Cowie, Graham, Kettle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I would support this, but I don't know how we can do it using sort of local, contracts and everything to get the work done. And that's, I know normally we're looking for the best deal going around, but I think we should. This would be a good opportunity if we wanted to do something, just to use the locals that were available to do the work.
Graham, followed by Kettle.
Yeah, I don't very often agree with councillor Payne either, but I think do it now. Like, I think tendered prices are never going to be as cheap, people are coming off no money, they're not going to risk making that extra buck by charging out a bit more to do it. The only thing I see is we're going to get all those negative Nancy's. We're going to get a heap of crap from the public over.
Language, please.
Yeah, sorry. I thought we were doing wastewater as well. Yeah, I think now's time to do it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Catherwood.
Yeah, I'd like to agree that you do both jobs at the same time, but definitely to be deferred. I can understand doing it at the moment and helping our local trades, but with our restrictions that we've got, with our physical distancing, I can only see costs going upwards at this stage. I think this definitely needs to be looked into within the next 12 months, potentially going down and getting some concrete pricing. But yeah, with the restrictions, I can see the budget will blow out, actually. So I'd actually prefer that this is deferred.
Thank you for that. I think that certainly Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you. Charles. I'm going to go more favour, guys, on the deferred thing, only for the fact that I want to see things done properly. I think if we jump in now, you're jumping early. I know it's good prices and the rest of it, but I'm sorry, whether we like it or not, health and safety is going to come to a big part of how our world operates in the going future. If we jump too quick, you're going to do a building that, okay, it's not going to fit purpose later on. You've got a lot of re-evaluating around office spaces, and yeah, I just would like to get a bit more thoughts on to how things are going to operate and how we are going to sit people around and the rest of it. So I would like to see it deferred for 12 months, but never put it away.
So just before we go to you, Councillor Payne, I'll go to Jill.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to add a couple of comments regarding the cost estimates. The budgets as they've been proposed do include a considerable allowance for contingency and for that uncertainty as we work through the detailed design process. It has been on the books for probably at least 12 to 18 months going through the design process and review with staff. Do absolutely accept there are some other potential changes that we need to look at coming up. And the only other one would be that if we do defer it 12 months, then the cost implications would kick in year 3 when there are potentially some other big costs coming through depending on what decisions you make later on today. So it may pile up some of those funding decisions, albeit you have the long-term plan to review that next year.
Councillor Payne, followed by Ludeman, and then I'm going to try and push it.
Your Worship, I want to support our staff as well. I mean, they play a hell of a role for us and do a lot of good stuff for us. So there's a health and safety component to this as well in the light of the COVID. And if we're crammed into a building and like sardines, I mean, in social distancing, it's a problem. So I think sooner rather than later in my books. And I'm sure it's something that hasn't just cropped up. It's been on the books for some time. We can't just keep deferring things at this stage, I don't believe so.
Councillor Ludeman, and then I'm looking for recommendation.
I actually support Councillor Payne. I'm for actually doing this, but we've already spent 173k on it. Staff have actually given up their wage increase this year of 181k, and actually it is a very tight working conditions here, and in parts the heating has been disgusting for years. So actually we do have to think of our staff as well, and so I'm supportive of this. I mean, obviously it has to go out for tender, so we're working within budgets, and I guess if tender prices blow out, well then it comes back to council for another decision. And who knows, we may be able to support our local builders in this exercise. I'm sure if not all, some of the subbies or whatever. And so no, I'm supportive of it. In that case, I would actually be prepared to move the motion that we approve both 1, 2 and 3.
Okay then, so I was going to take them individually, but yeah, I'll roll with the 3. So that is that we receive the report and that we approve the budget of 950,000 and we approve an additional budget of 593,000.
We'll do it all at once.
Can I suggest we take number 1 out and do it separately?
I'm going to roll with this one, John. I was going to do it that way, but we will receive the report anyway.
I'm not happy to push through.
Okay then. We will do it individually if I can. I get it that some will totally want to receive the report. So I will come straight back to you for your recommendations, Ali, but I'm now looking for someone to just move recommendation 1. Move Councillor Finn, seconded Councillor Herbert. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against. Now we have the second recommendation, and I go to Councillor Ludeman.
Well, I approve a budget of 950.
Right, the matter's open for discussion specifically on the budget of 950. First, Councillor Graham, followed by Councillor Mulville. I was just happy to second that to you. As you were, I needed a seconder, so I take your seconder and now I go to Councillor Graham.
No, that's what I was just going to do.
Right, now that's...
Yeah, well, yeah. But I think just referring back to the costs as far as social distance and that, I think you got your heads up in the sand. If you think that social distancing is going to be here after we drop out of level 1, I think we're still fresh in your mind, level 4 or level 3, but they're not going to have, you're not going to have to be 1 to 2 metres apart once we drop out of level 1. Guaranteed.
Councillor Herbert, followed by sort of stand, then Councillor Foster. So, Malik, you could, yeah, because I'm totally rocked out there.
The fact of the matter is none of us know what the future holds. To say that is wrong. We don't, 6 months ago, if we said we were sitting in this room, if we hadn't had a meeting for 2 months because we couldn't sit in the same room, you'd say you're crazy. To actually say that, none of us know what the new world holds, how workers are going to interact. This could come back, this could be the start of it. It could be twice as bad in a year's time. We don't, the fact is now, we don't know, and actually no one knows. So until, for a lot of these things, you're actually going to have a much better idea in 12, 6 months' time of how people are going to interact and what the new normal is going to be.
Councillor Foster, and we're not just going to get into a general game of tennis. I hope Councillor Graham Kelly.
I agree with Councillor Herbert, and in my view, perception is everything. Whether it's coming, off, if it contributes towards the rates or not, that we can be sitting here with an upgrade of a new building over the next 12 months when many people will be struggling, and I don't agree with the timing.
Councillor Cowie, followed by Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, can I ask a question? I'm looking at page 56 regarding the discussion. With the heating system, there had been a couple of fires in the heating, which is something I was unaware of. Can someone just explain a wee bit more detail about that, please?
Jules has got his hand.
Oh,
Jules.
Yes, the heating system in the old part of the building has heating elements as well as air blowers that run on belts. And above Valerie's office, probably before Steve started, one of those belts got worn and got jammed. and it was a small fire. It wasn't a massive fire, but the belt created some issues. We have had another one of those heating units get dust on the elements, and when that started, it smelt like there was smoke going through the building as well, but it was really dust burning off the elements. So they've been relatively minor, but I suppose they reflect the age and nature of the systems that we have up there, and they wouldn't be considered good practice systems nowadays. And they do create issues in some offices where there is very little ventilation or too much ventilation at times. And we're having offices at the moment having to be cooled or heated from heat pumps in adjacent offices with relatively little air movement.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Grant for the Payne.
Yeah, we don't know what's going to be down the track, but they probably thought that after the influenza in 1917 or 19 or whatever it is, if you take it, I don't know what's going to happen, so why should I pay my rates or pay my bills or, you know, you've got to be, you can't come here and be that negative that we don't do anything.
Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I always try to analyse things, and I'm sitting here saying, what are the benefits? And we've discussed plenty of them. And now I'm thinking about the other side of it and saying, well, you know, what's the cost? And next year, to me, in my mind, it's 0.04 rates, additional rates. Is that correct?
It doesn't impact next year.
Not next year, the following year. Yeah, yeah. So, and then after that, it's 0.011 or something, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's very little, and it's spread over time as well. So it's, I think it's negligible. And am I right or wrong? Am I reading that wrong?
Sorry, George has got his hand up. George has got his hand up.
Yeah, we'll go to Jules. Hopefully, inside Kennel.
Yeah, okay.
Jules.
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, Councillor Payne, that's correct. For the project is proposed to be funded partly through reserves and partly through loan funding. And if you approve both components, there'll be a 0.15% increase in rates to loan fund a 25-year loan for those. So it is a small increase, but it's an increase over a long period of time. Once it's increased, it's that in the baseline going forward for the period of that loan.
Thank you for that, Jules. Just as I look up there, I also see that we've got either an additional staff member or a member of the public under Knowles. Could Knowles please identify themselves?
Scott,
Nolene Scott.
Oh, how are you, Nolene? Welcome. Thank you, Nolene. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Okay.
Matt and Catherine have joined as well, Brian. Now.
Yeah. Who's that?
Matt and Catherine.
Oh, Matt Cordaway. Welcome, Matt.
Are disconnected.
Oh, Catherine will be too. So, councillors, specifically on this one, have we exhausted discussion and we're about to put the vote? Councillor Volwiller, did you move?
No, second.
Second. Yeah, no, you're fine.
I haven't spoken yet. So it's easy to kick these decisions down the road. I mean, there's always going to be the perception that a council's wasting money on its buildings. So, and it's easy to kick these things down the road forever. And the ORC, the Regional Council, is a good example of that, just because there's public outcry about spending money on facilities where councillors and staff happen to work. So for that reason, I think we do it now. There's unknowns and they have to be factored in, but there's always been unknowns in the past, and we may not be any wiser in 12 months' time as to what it is. So and there might be something else arise. So we have to do the best with the information we have at the time and keep moving forward. So the design may change because of what's happened recently to make social distancing and such like more easy to occur if an event like this happens again. But I think we should be looking for, and going back to that's certainly how this whole pandemic has been treated from New Zealand. Business will generally get back to normal. So that's, yeah, I definitely support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. For my part, I suppose I am the one councillor as such that works the most in this building, and it is dysfunctional. There's especially in those areas that you just see staff too close together. But I'm also mindful that we're representing 89,000 ratepayers and our communities, and each and every one of them will have been traumatised by the last couple of months. And this will be one of the things that they will focus on very much. It's a timing issue, and I'm conflicted on the fact that on one point I'm asking the staff inside the building to acknowledge the challenges and take no wage rise, and then blissfully go ahead and develop the building that they're in. To me, it seems to be that consistency would be that we would defer, but sorry, which one is that? Ian, sorry.
Just before Ian, Your Worship, just for clarity, the only changes that are impacting on staff to the benefit of staff is the heating side of things and effectively the toilet and sick bay arrangements. All other impacts are either in the governance side for the chambers and the customers. So it is additional level of service for the customers for providing to them. Sorry.
Ian, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. I guess I was just going to reinforce the point that Steve was about to make, and really from a customer worker or a customer staff perspective, I guess my area is the area that's affected most by having the public visiting, and the one thing that is a concern to me is, well, partly security, but also partly that a lot of our consultation with the public is done in the work area. And I guess one of the central motivations for doing the alterations, as I understood it, was to provide that space to allow our staff to meet with customers in areas which are specifically intended for that purpose and not in their work in their workspace, and in some cases some relatively tight offices. And I think from a worker point of view, we're relatively comfortable with the how much space is available for us to work. But when we start to get several customers in at the same time, that becomes a real concern. And in this particular environment, if you want to protect your staff a little more, then we should be limiting the amount of time that we've got the public actually entering our workspaces. So in terms of the times, I would suggest that if nothing else, setting up a system which allows for public spaces versus staff space and not having the two mix, this of any time in terms of the conditions that we find ourselves in would be the right time to try and make that distinction.
Thank you. Well, it's going to be decided by a vote, and we've got to move in a second. So I will put to the vote. Can I please, when we do it, have a show of hands? So all those in favour, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye. Can you read it out?
It's in front of us. It's the approved. So number 2, it's just approved. Sorry, so I'll run through that again. So we're only doing recommendation number 2, and it's for the approved option. My apologies. If we could run it through again. All those in favour, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, Your Worship.
And all those against, please raise your hand and say nay.
No. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, Your Worship.
Motion is moved. Carried. Carried. Do the second wish to have their votes recorded?
Yes, please.
So that's Councillors Herbert. That's everyone other than myself.
Yeah, but just from the.
Oh, yes, sorry. So recording, please. Councillor Finch, Herbert, Wilkinson, Catherwood, Foster, Kennedy. Have their votes recorded. Rightio. We had some close votes today. Interesting. Councillor Wheeler.
Just carrying on then, I would like to move that council approves the additional budget of $593,000 loan funded to enable the old areas of the Rosebank office lift to be renewed at the same time as the building upgrade, I think. So I think that makes sense now that we've approved the upgrade, that the roof renewal occurs at the same time.
Is that seconded? Is it seconded, Councillor Payne? Matters open for discussion. There is no discussion. I'll put it to the vote. This time, once again, can we please raise hands and say aye if you're in favour?
Aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, Your Worship.
Those against, please raise hands and say nay.
No.
7. Do those that say nay wish to have their votes recorded?
Yep.
So the same 6 wish to have their vote recorded. Thank you.
So that one's not you.
That's me. Yeah, no, I don't want to call it.
So was it the same vote?
Yeah, exactly the same set as the way before. So that's moved those ones forward. Thank you for your deliberation on that, councillors. Our Place Community Plan Projects. Mike and Larissa, this is your report, item for decision. Just before we go to the discussion, is there anything you wish to add to your report, either Larissa or Mike?
I'm happy to take the report as read, Your Worship, and Mike, Steve and I are on hand to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for that. Matters open for discussion, councillors. What I might do in the same vein as last time is, let's just tick off the received one for a start. So I'm looking to move Councillor Payne, seconded. Councillor Catherwood to receive the report. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against. Right now, if we could exclusively have a discussion around recommendation 2 or 3 or 4. Councillor Herrick.
I'll make a quick comment. To me, it really should be us assisting the staff in this decision. It's them that have the majority of the workload. I mean, it's us that sit in here and make some decisions around the community plans, but it's really the workload's on them. I suppose it's a question for Steve and the rest of the staff. If they think they can carry it out as normal, then perhaps we carry on. But if it's a burden, then the decision's made for it.
I look at it around the other way, John, that if we as a council determine we're going to move our district forward, then it's up to us to resource staff if that is the issue. This is whether we want to move forward or not.
Your Worship, I perhaps need to clarify that the issue isn't are we putting this to you because of the question of resourcing. The issue is being put to you in 2 parts for you to decide and reconfirm or not reconfirm the whole community plan process. Because this question, just like you debated the building question and other things, there are other things that hinge off this. So we've got current activities, we've just done the Catlins, and there will be actions that have costs and other implications. Not so much resource implications, it's costs. So the whole point about this one is to say to you, because I have heard, from different quarters, different perspectives about, hey, this is discretionary, or it's nice to have, or it's something, right? So I need to know, and the staff need to know, and the community needs to know from you, whether or not you are still pushing ahead with the action on community plans that have already been done. There's a raft of projects. And that doesn't mean that you are then deciding on an individual one, because the community hub is a classic one. That's another decision that's coming to you specifically as part of that, as others will too. But the whole point that I'm bringing to you, because I'm pushing the point to you, is in dealing with that issue that you may or may not have, is do you support that strategic approach and the necessity to do it, or do you want to put a hold on it and defer it, including ones that are already in action and ones that we're moving forward to? Another classic example to you is the proposal that we've had quite rightly concern from you about our non-delivery of projects, and we know there's some reasons for that. And so when we look at the entirety of the program, it justifies more resources being recruited, another project implementation position, for example. And if you decide not to go down that pathway, we're not going to be recruiting that position. So these are important things. We've got a program of work with actions. already? Do you still commit to those for the strategic reasons? And we've got new ones, Lawrence. You know, we can stop Lawrence and we can stop Kaitangata and the other communities. So I'm putting it onto you and being tough to you because there are consequences. If you don't commit to it, that's okay, and it gives us direction and things aren't going to happen. If you commit to it, there are consequences of actions and costs that will be coming to you. I just want to get strategic confirmation one way or another as to where we go. That's why we're raising it.
And can I say, just as an added bit of information, like I'm the only reason that I'm here is for the projects. Well, not the only reason, but the main reason for coming back has been for the projects that we've already got in the pipeline. But I did note, and I hope Councillor Foster backs me up on this, that when we're at Lawrence, just entering into the uncertainties, there was definitely a reticence from the public to come to the meetings. We have one at the Wild Walnut, and no one turned up, and we had one at the Prospector, and you could just feel the public wanted to stay away from you. So for me, this is in two parts. The ones that are in the pipeline, I'm fully committed to, but I do think that at the very least for the likes of Lawrence, so that we can embrace the public and not go to these meetings and have them stay away just because of COVID, that we delay them into October or somewhere where we can re-embrace the public and get the consultation process and have the feedback like we should be having, where we're truly embraced by the public, because they did not embrace us. And where was that, Mel? Early March, late February?
It was the week, it was a few days before. No, it was about a week before lockdown.
Right, so it's just really noticeable that they stayed away. But I'll move into Councillor Finch, Councillor Kennedy, Councillor Foster, Councillor Ludeman.
So it's probably a question for Larissa. On the bottom of page 59, it's got a further 6 plans were identified in the 2028 long-term plan. I assume that's a typo that needs fixed, please.
That is around the upcoming areas that are to be covered. For example, there's West Otago. Yeah, I can pull that list out for you. But that is to cover the remaining communities throughout the district.
So it was meant to be the year 28?
Yes, yes, you're right.
Okay, thank you.
2018.
Yeah, but she said 2020.
Can we get further clarification on that? Sorry, Larissa.
Possibly, if I could just speak to that, Your Worship. Yeah, no, I think it is a typo. Should be 2018/28. Yeah, bottom of page 59.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Kennedy, followed by Foster, followed by Ludeman.
Well, I sit with this where that we reconfirm our commitment to the community plans. A lot of work's already gone into these plans. Sometimes, some things they may not advance as quick, but our communities need projects to keep going with. Teams with progress with the smaller projects as they can. Rebuild the economy factor in our communities and sign off on some of these projects. Also helps someone else in the community and may bring in more jobs for them. The other side of it, I will put on hold for a year. But with a big thing going out to the Lawrence and our other communities that have had nothing seen to being done in their areas at this time, just a reminder that they haven't been forgotten. We will get back to them, and maybe, like you said, Brian, things change on how these discussion groups are held and that, but to remind the other communities that it doesn't mean they need to stagnate. They can still do little things in their communities as group projects and that, but for all the work that we have done prior, I would still like to see, because we still have such a great list there of even stage 2 Clutha streetscape, you know, nothing's finally, I am not going to leave this council till I see some things ticked off. Okay.
There's a warning, Councillor. Councillor Foster, followed by Ludeman.
Worship, I agree that the projects that are already underway should still try and continue with as much as we can with that to show confidence in the district and a positive message. As far as the community plans on hold until July 21, which would include Lawrence and Kaitangata, I think that's, to me, is too, from Lawrence's point of view, that's too far away. I don't see why we couldn't sort of just wait until we get to a stage where we can actually have groups again. And I'd still like to sort of keep the process open as far as Councillor Kennedy said, already through the consultation process, we've had groups that have sort of said, look, you know, we can do that, flick us a few thousand and we can, you know, beautify this area. So I think there's to sort of keep that momentum going, that we should have a sort of an interim level of a community plan at Lawrence, keep people talking, but you know, extend it until we can have open workshops before we finalise the whole process.
So Mel, do I take it from that, because I wrote 6 months, so that rather than hold until July 2021, that we hold until spring, October, we go through the winter, the COVID touch wood has disappeared, and we can reevaluate in the spring?
I don't think we can put a date on it. I think it just has to wait until we're told that we can have group gatherings again. And so, you know, whenever that is. Yeah.
Your Worship, just to clarify for that one, so I mean, we will take guidance. So if Council had the same view that we still want to progress community plans, the development of community plans, let's say Lawrence is the example, as and when it can effectively be progressed, then, you know, we don't have to put a date necessarily, Your Worship. We could just say that we understand that you would be effectively reconfirming commitment to progress the plans, but obviously in practice, we'll only be doing it with your agreement as to when it could be.
Yes, and I think with Lawrence as well, we've got our community board that can get involved in driving some of the projects. But any of the more chunkier projects that are going to take, you know, serious money, I think that probably needs to be deferred for, you know, for a period.
Okay. Councillor Ludeman.
I support continuing the projects that we've got identified right down through to the cat months. Definitely, we've done the groundwork. We need to carry on with that. Otherwise, yeah. And Lawrence, we've started there, so I agree. We perhaps defer till we can, able to have the meetings, but perhaps leave the other community plans for this year, defer them until at least next year. So like we have touched base with Lawrence, so I think it would be a shame not to, when we can, to carry on, but put the effort into what we've got here in this financial year and then move forward from there next year.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mulwiller, followed by Graham.
Thank you, Worship. I'm definitely in favour of continuing with the community plans. Just looking at the schedule on the table on page 60, we're actually pushing back those community plans, all those community plans by a year if we stick with that timetable anyway. And if I go over to Tory Mouth and say, well, I'm going to put you on hold until we make, you know, give a no date, we'll get a strong kickback there. The other thing is, in conjunction with the community plans, we're also doing reserve management plans. All our reserve management plans are basically out of date. Reserve management plans are supposed to be done reviewed every 10 years. Now, we are well behind with that, 15 years in some cases. Again, I'm thinking of the likes of Tory Mouth. They are impatient to get to their plans, their reserve management plans done as well. So I think we continue with the schedule. It's revised now. Everything's put back a year. And the other thing is, well, we develop the community plans. We will identify projects. Some low-hanging fruit there that the communities themselves can do, the community groups can pick up for relatively low cost too. So that can be coordinated with everything else, some of the big projects may not happen at the time. So actually, I'm prepared to move there on, go back to the recommendation, that we reconfirm the commitment to the development of community plans, and that we reconfirm the commitment to progress community plan projects. We're not actually specifically saying what projects are and whether we're giving them funding at the moment or timelines for the projects. But I think we need to keep this program going forward. Good faith.
I ask a question, Councillor Wheeler, there is no part that you put in there about deferral of future plans. So you'll just want, right? So that's what you want.
Timetable on page, the timetable on page 60 was.
Yes, we just hold to that.
That is the timetable now, and it will depend, of course, on opening up, being able to open up and consult with the communities. Perhaps that should be just in the right.
Yeah, we take that as it. So it's seconded, Councillor Finch. The matter's open for discussion. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, Councillor Ludeman, they had started consultation with COD as well. I'm completely in agreement with Councillor Foster. I know that when Mike was down at Kai, it was explained that the Kai one would trail Lawrence. Their feeling is we basically know what we want. We'll do it. You catch up with us when you're ready. So yeah, if you've got proactive groups in the community, it's not really going to make a lot of difference.
High rules.
Oh, let's say that. Swear.
Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Your Worship. Once again, I find myself agreeing with Councillor Payne. So, just to add to that, though, is I think we've got a real opportunity to be district leaders in the COVID recovery, and this plays a big part in that. And I mean, if we can get these projects moving along and we get people involved, communities, everything, that builds confidence, it builds all sorts of things. And we all know fair and well that we're in one of the best districts already. And I don't see that this, by agreeing to these, continuing to limit us in any way. So yeah, I'm actually for option 2 and 4 as well. So it enables people to get on with life rather than handouts and whatever it is.
Thank you for that. I think I'm looking for anyone with a counter argument, otherwise we're going to put it to the vote. Just to move things along, there is no counter argument. Let's be putting it to the vote. Is everyone quite clear what Councillor Wheeler's recommendations were? Sorry, not Councillor, just
check please, the resolution is just as it currently stands. There was discussion at one point of adding the words "and" as when they can be progressed.
No, as I took it, it's basically number 2 and 4, and we're whipping out 3 and 5.
And we were saying we did understand.
We know that the ancillary.
Yeah.
So everyone's quite clear. We'll put it to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. We'll move over to Climate Change Leadership and Response Program. It's an item for decision. Larissa, do you have anything you wish to add to your item?
Same again, Your Worship, just to take it as read and available to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. Matters open for discussion, councillors. If there is no discussion, I'm prepared to take recommendation 1 and 2. If Councillor Wheeler.
I'm happy to move recommendation 1 that we receive report, and also recommendation 2 that we approve $20,000 for completion of stage 2 in the climate change. Well, the reason is we've started this process. I think we need to continue with it now. It will feed into other decision making that we do as we in the future as well, including perhaps some of our district plan review. So I think just to put it aside now, it wouldn't serve any purpose.
Thank you. So Councillor Wheeler is moving recommendation 1 and recommendation 2 as an approved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kennedy. Matters open for discussion. If There is no discussion put to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. Moving over to page 66 where we have the capital projects review. Jules, do you have anything you wish to add to your item?
Thank you, Your Worship. I suppose the only thing I would mention there is that there are some sewage treatment upgrades, and they are the reason we're recommending those deferred is there's just the likely length it's going to take us to get the consenting process to be completed, and we are in discussions with I'm going to be discussing with the regional council the approach we're taking to those consents. That hasn't been confirmed yet which way we're going, but it may be a short-term consent with a view to a longer-term consent that gives us more time to work through exactly what will be required for that, and that would see compliance achieved during that short-term consent. So even if we progress with trying to get those consents through the books, we think it's likely that they will take some time. They've already been with the regional council for sort of 2.5 years now. So that's just the update on those ones. Happy to take any further questions, Your Honour, Your Worship.
Thank you for that. Matters open for discussion, councillors. I do have a question. Sorry, I'll go. It's just a question, Bruce. I do have a question, Jules. And item number 2, proposed adjustments to project timing. And partway down there, it's got, this includes the Milton Main Street project that council has indicated some form of consultation process with the community is required. I actually thought we'd finished with specifically the Main Street of Milton. We were now leaving it over to the landscape designer, the urban landscape designers, and we would go back and tell Milton the recommendations, but I didn't know we were going out for full consultation. Otherwise, we end up like we did in Sukigard Terrace, where you get non-qualified people. But you know what happened the last time down the Clutha Main Street as well.
Through you, Your Worship, just happy to clarify my understanding from the workshop was that wasn't thinking there would be full consultation by any means, but I took from the workshop that there would definitely be some form of consultation once we had the preferred council design. So knowing how long those processes have taken in the past, I was trying to be realistic about when this would come to construction based on previous projects of this nature. So happy to have that amended if my understanding was not correct.
Because that was the next part of where I was heading, was that I actually thought that we were in the next 12 months into bulldozers and doing the job, and yet when you look, we're pushing it out to 24 months. It just seems to be taking a long time.
Through you, Worship, I'm happy to have clarification from the direction from the workshop, from councillors who were there, especially the Bruce Ward councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Volwiller had his hand up first. Okay, so go to Councillor Finch.
I understood when we said it, Jules, that it was just to be like some Milton area promotions and Project Bruce and such like, not the whole community. Am I wrong?
I might have missed that. Meeting.
Is that what we agreed on?
Yep.
Yeah, so it was just those few community groups, not the whole public. Was that your
Through you, Your Worship, any sort of consultation can sometimes add quite a lengthy process to these, and I was just trying to be realistic in terms of the time it takes to get the detailed design done, the contract out, and get a contractor on the ground spending significant amount of money. It did take quite some time with the Clutha Main Street project, and with the other workload on, I thought the change in timing was realistic.
So if there's any opportunity to bring that forward, we will.
Absolutely, that can be. That is one of council, I'd imagine, going to be a key project going forward, which would mean it would be, if it's confirmed for next year, it would potentially be moved into a Category A project, if council so wishes.
So?
Well, that's what I thought it was anyway, so it'll be to change it actually. So thank you for that. Councillor Volwiller, you did have your hand up.
Yes,
another matter. Sorry.
Thanks. It was more a question I was going to ask. I'm presuming then there's no actual impact on rates for this for the next year through these deferrals, these adjustments. That's a question.
Through you, Your Worship, I'd have to defer that to Sharon, but my understanding is there will be an impact on rates if this is deferred. This wasn't included in the baseline budget, as this was something for you to consider as part of this project. It won't impact on next year's rates, but it'll impact on years 2 and 3.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Righto. We've got some recommendations there in front of us. Is someone prepared to move? Councillor Herbert, seconded by Councillor Finch. Any further discussion? Put to the vote. All those in favour?
This for both recommendations.
That's for both, yes. So put to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. Righto, we will move over to future options for Clutha Memorial Hall. Mike, is there anything you wish to add to your item? Mike? I'll take that as a no. Okay, Councillor. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just missed that. Did you need something?
No, just asking, is there any additional information that you have to give us before we discuss the matter?
No, sorry. No, Your Worship, no. Carry on.
Councillors, so you know what I intend to do. I'll take items individually. Obviously, there's a 2 or 3 there, or a 4, but I think we should move we received the report. Move Councillor Finch, seconded Councillor Thompson. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Thank you. Right, the matter's open for discussion. Can I say for my part, for the matter that's open for discussion, that I never thought that the discussion has been framed properly. Council's in an insidious position that we either have no town hall in Clutha, we spend $5.2 million to have a 70-year-old town hall that's in many ways dysfunctional, or we go out to the public, or possibly the government, or alternative funding, and we get a modern, fit-for-purpose, beautiful new facility for virtually no more money. We're in no man's land here. To me, the argument's always been, is it $5.2 million on earthquake-prone building, or do we take the recommendation of a group that spent 7,000 hours considering every single option? And that's where it's framed to me, but matters open for discussion. Councillor Catherwood.
Yeah, I totally appreciate all the work that the community hub has done. I like the concept, no issues there, but I'll definitely be with Council to first decision on funding work to rejuvenate the Memorial Hall. Not necessarily until 2021. I think we've got to wait for the big decision of where central government comes in with their funding. And as far as that funding goes in towards the mix of the ratepayer coming in to fund with the community hub going out into the community to find other funds from other sources, I actually don't believe we can make a decision on 2 and 3 today until we actually have a confirmation of where the central government funding is coming in.
Your Worship, I might need to clarify that for the councillor and for the rest of the council. The issue would be that the government will not provide funding if council does not provide funding. So I think you have to look at that perspective. If you're asking the question, is this deferment option an option because we should wait for government funding? That would be, that's not a deferment option. It's a deferment option for other reasons if you have it, but not waiting for government funding, simply because it's quite clear that unless this council put up its contribution, we would not be getting anything from the government, or it's highly unlikely we will be getting anything from the government.
Councillor Herbert, followed by Kennedy Graham.
Thank you very much. Look, I agree in principle of what's just been said, and it's one of those chicken and egg things that someone has to go first, and generally it's the council. And similar to the doing up of the building, I have issues with it and the perception that people see out there. And I also understand that we've got to kickstart the economy, and a lot of those people don't run their own business either that espouse that sort of a view. But I would like to know, and I understand that we have to commit some funds to kick this thing off, But I don't think we want to put ourselves in a position where we're providing half the funding and the Crown Infrastructure is providing half the funding. Because you're denying people out there, some of those third-party people and individuals, the right to get involved in this. And Michelle and I talked about this on the way down. And some of the things in our local neck of the woods that have been successful, like community centres and like medical centres and those sort of things, if you get community buy-in, you get individuals into it, it's actually destined to succeed. They've got ownership. Might not be financial, but it's emotional. If they've done some work on it, they've donated time, donated machinery, however they've done it, you've got community buy-in. I think you've got to give people the opportunity there. So I'd like to see us commit some funds, quite happy to defer it for a little while, but there needs to be I don't want a mix of just the Crown Infrastructure Fund and just ratepayers. It needs to be some of those third-party funders that we've talked about at length before.
Councillor Kennedy, followed by Grant.
John has said it all from my point of view. Just a question I've got is the option 2, the $22 that goes across the uniform annual general charge, so that's every ratepayer. Does that $22 always stay there, like the cross recreation centre? Is it a fund that gets paid off, or is it always there?
It stays there for
the term of the loan. So it's a loan.
Right.
Councillor Grant.
Yeah, I think people saying 7.5 million or what, we're only talking a difference of 3.5 million or something. And when I say only, I don't mean that. That we spend $4 million or $5 million and getting as you say, I don't know how old, the building is 75 years old, and in 10 years' time, it's going to be 80 years old, and it's still not going to. All we're doing is making it earthquake-proof, and people can go and use it. You don't build old. I can remember them talking about that when they built the prison. Why are they building the prison with underfloor heating and this and this and this? Why don't they build it like the one down in Invercargill? You don't build old. In 20 years' time, if you go to the complete rebuild, you've still got a purpose-built building that functions and is an asset instead of something that's going to be a drain on rates forever.
Thank you. Councillor Ludeman.
I actually support option 2 that we do this. Now, there's been discussion about the 7.5 million and if the Crown Infrastructure Fund was to come through, well, that's a lot of what ifs. But we could word it that we're including a budget of up to 7.5 million. So that means there's flexibility there. It's of up to 7.5. We sent this group out almost 3 years ago to work on this project, and the hours that they've spent on it voluntarily have been huge. Yes, it's unfortunate COVID-19's come along and we are all concerned about what the future brings, but actually our town hall at present is not fit for purpose. We would have to spend either 5 million on it to bring it up to what we've got now, which is still not fit for purpose because it's just not being used, or else we mothball the town hall completely. And I think that would be a real shame for the district. In the past, council have supported West Otago House to get a beautiful facility. They supported the rec centre. Loan funded.
Only to the West Otago district,
yes,
not to the whole district, sorry.
But
That's the Otago, nothing to do with it.
John,
we've still supported other projects, the Lawrence Swimming Pool. We've supported other areas to get projects going. And I think it would be a shame if after all this time, this group and the heirs, I mean, why did we send them away? It's like sending them away on a blimmin' juice chase, really, if we're not supporting them now. So that's my call. And yes, we could defer it, but actually they're basically shovel ready. They've got right down to absolutely shovel ready to go, and to defer that I think is a shame. We need to be supporting the district at this time, so that's, yeah, I support that.
Thank you. Councillor Costa, followed by myself.
Your Worship, yes, I agree with some of the sentiments that have already been said. The timing again is not great, but we are shovel ready, and you know, we don't want to impact that potential government funding by deferring it. In my view, it's going to support the local economy. I was a bit concerned about the rates impact on the Clutha residents. I have had feedback that there is good support from the ward for it. My main concern was how flexible the space is going to be, and I did raise that when the trust presented to us, and I was told it was flexible. To me, we're focusing a bit too much on the business sort of network side rather than a community hub, and I agree it's great to have that, but I'd like to think that we could still consider moving the library through there to make it a real community space. The worst thing that could happen is that we build this beautiful building and not many people are there during the day, and there's nothing, you know, worse than a sort of a white elephant sitting there. But if it's going to be a community hub, it has to have that that feel about it, and there's many community aspects to it in my view.
Thank you, Councillor Foster.
I support option 2, sorry.
Thank you. For me, this runs far deeper in the fact that I know 9 or 10 years ago when I first came in as mayor, what do we want to be as a council? What were we as a district? And so much of our district had negative connotations, not only to ourselves, but to the wider country. And over the years, we've built a momentum and we've built confidence, and this council has not once blinked in supporting any area with a growth project. And yeah, sure, they were in times that are slightly different than now, but this is defining. And for me, if I wasn't to support this, I don't know why I was here for the last 9 years. Because Clutha will unravel, and then Milton will unravel, and then Lawrence, Cone, and then we unravel. I believe in this district, and I believe in our district's future. I believe that Calder Stewart, when as the preferred constructor, or whatever the proper name is, they've got a team up in Queenstown. And with all the issues that are up in Queenstown, we're actually assisting in bringing our own back, because Calder and Stewart is very much our own. And this project has got so many defining issues that are wider than just the bricks and mortar building. It's about everything that we've tried to achieve as a council, as I've seen it. It's every hope and dream that we've got for our district wrapped up. If we stumble at this hurdle, where do we go from here? The litmus test for me will be that when we go out to the community, and boy, I really hope that the government gets behind us with the spade ready. But when and if we have to go out to the community, wouldn't it be neat if we didn't? But if we do, that is the litmus test. And it always has been in my books. I believe in Clutha. I believe in the district. I believe that we can do this. So I'll be in support of number 2.
Option number
3. Resolution 3.
3, as it were. Option 2 are the ones we're doing now. Councillor Payne.
October, if we get through this COVID thing. Thank you, Your Worship. I mean, I'm not going to reiterate all the benefits of this. Everyone's read the material. It's a very, very good report, I feel. But I do want to just respond to some of the things that have been said. And I think one of the most significant thing is it's 5 million or 7.5, or we don't have a hall. And it's not just a hall that we're trying to do. We're trying to do something much more than a hall. We're trying to build a hub that actually is going to be fit for purpose. And as far as flexibility is concerned, we did look at the option of the library and the feasibility study, or the costing of it was just going to be too big a footprint. It was never going to fit. Which was astronomical and something totally unachievable for a community group. So just to explain that part of it. Third-party funders, to respond to Councillor Herbert, we have not ruled third-party funders out at all, and we realise we will have to go out to them and reach out to them to do some of this, and hence why it's written in that Council 3, 75. I mean, I'm thinking anyway, is the agreement to begin construction without 75%. So I think that might answer that. We are still looking at third-party funders, no problems.
Excuse me, Councillor Payne, can I just hold here, because we're having a discussion. Councillor Graham, on quite a contentious votes moved out now. As I take an understanding orders, if you leave during the middle of a debate, you're not allowed to vote on that. So what I'm going to do is, for some unknown reason he's left, I presume it's an urgent issue, I'm going to adjourn for a couple of minutes and just remind him of the precarious situation, because if it comes down to a split vote, he's leaving. So my apologies, but it's just a point of a so adjourn, and I'll just.
I'm jotting notes down.
Well, order, please. Point of order.
We haven't actually. There's no motion on the table as such yet. So
I take it for standing orders that if you leave and the process of the debate, if you leave at any time, you're not allowed to vote on. I stand to be corrected, and there we go.
Yes.
You don't know the pressure of that, did Brucey? Right, Councillor Payne, if you went right back to as best you can the start, because if you leave in the middle, you're not able to vote, Bruce.
I'm not sure.
So Councillor Graham is back in the meeting.
So Councillor Graham's back. So Councillor Payne.
Right, yeah, we've had the discussion around 5 million, not 7.5, haven't we? We've had the discussion around, and it's a no-brainer. It's 5.5 million or 7.5, no or no all. Third-party funding, we have not ruled that out at all. We're still looking at third-party funders, and we'll be reaching out to the community and further afield than that to do that third-party funding. Make no mistake, and we realise that we're going to have to. I believe that number 3 has already got a subject to in there, and that covers that off. I believe also the rates modelling. I put rates modelling down here, and that's important because we know that half of it, or I think half of it will be at UAGC, and the other half will be community of interest, which covers off the Clutha district and leaves best to take out. That's for Councillor Herbert. I don't believe for a minute it doesn't benefit the whole district. There's plenty of things there. There's our Maori people. There's our arts, our crafts, our theatre, there's travelling shows, there's all sorts of things that we're trying to bring into the district. We know it's not fit for purpose. That's the reason we're not getting a lot of these there. Well, that's part of the reason, it's not all the reason. If we can do that, I believe that the wider district will come to see these shows, and so it does in some way benefit the whole district, whether they're showing off a picture they've painted or they're platforming something or other. But I do believe it is a benefit to all. So, yeah, and I'll just remind everybody that when we went into this, the decision to support the community hub was a unanimous decision, 100%. There was never any doubt. It's unfortunate what has happened with the COVID, but it has happened, and I don't believe we should stall this because of that.
Sorry, you made a comment about the library too in your...
Oh, well, about for the council, yeah. But we did look in our pre-feasibility studies, the possibility of adding the library into the complex. It wasn't viable financially. The footprint was going to be too great in the area to do it, and the only option was to go up. It just cost prohibitive, really. Cost a bit more than that, but Steve might like to elaborate on that one. But, yeah.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, I'd just like to agree with Councillor Payne's comment. I think, yeah, it's going to provide a great new facility for our Clutha and the surrounding districts with, like what we've said, about all various different things it's going to have in it. And also, like Calder Stewart have given us great new concept plans and that, which all looks pretty smart. And plus also, you know, it's going to provide a lot of employment for people building it, like we said, and it's going to be good for that Clutha district. And yeah, so I'm probably supportive of option 3. Thanks.
Right, I'm looking for a recommendation from someone, please. Councillor Payne.
I'd like to move that we do motion number 3. Thank you.
Councillor.
Each set a conflict of interest, is he allowed to move it?
Yes, we've agreed to, we've acknowledged the interest is there, but just as he was assigned the task, council sent it to him, it's just the same as you on the groups you're on, Gainer. If we send you there, you shouldn't be conflicted.
So just make a clarification point for the resolution, Your Worship. There was a question mark on part of it, the subject to. So we normally have the requirement, Your Worship, about non-releasing any funds until, so council doesn't get into trouble, about authorising project when we don't actually get third-party funding. So I just put in there 75%. You might say 80%, or you might say 85 or 90%, or be really tough and say 100%. So I just want to be clear that in proposing that option 3, you haven't discussed in any form together, and in that sense, what's the limit?
So do I take it, Councillor Payne, and you're setting your recommendation at 75%?
I just let me have all everything about this.
One thing I could say, Your Worship, is whether or not you agree with the resolution, you probably should get bipartisan support to sort of say what percentage that you would go to if you were providing it. That doesn't stop you still voting against it, but it helps finding what percentage there should be.
Hold on a minute, I'm just giving the mover a chance to consider before I hit the hands.
While he's thinking about that, do we make wording it's up to 7.5 million? Carol talked about it before, like 7.5 million is actually a target we've got.
Yeah, fair enough, up to. Well, I don't know, it's the recommenders.
Yeah, well, he's thinking about it.
Again, for clarification, the problem with that is it's a budget you're setting. So if there is to be implications in a rating implication sense.
Well, you always know the worst case scenario, though.
There's no implication in this next.
But when we do it, and when you're considering the prudency of the decision in terms of its impact on you to be, or even understanding that, there's still a up to for something like this gives you no indication of what actually you're going to spend.
So what you're saying, Steve, is that we set the budget there so that staff and the public can see that there is a budget up to there, and then we endeavour to do savings as we can.
If, for example, you set the budget at 7.5, which is sense there, and let's say the government gave a significant amount and you still had the ability to get third-party funding and were able to put that in without impacting on the government, you could end up only spending $6 million or something like that. So, and there would be a consequent rating reduction. But so that doesn't impact with that, but it does set the funding parameters.
So I'm going to go to Councillor Cowie's question, and then by that time, Councillor Payne, you're going to be set.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry. Oh no, this is through now, Mike. If you're listening, please. You've written this report. How did you come to the 75%? Is my question.
He didn't, so I'll answer for him.
Okay.
Sorry. I just put it in, and just because I felt there needed to be something, and I would think 75% is on the low end of what you might ask for. You might ask for 90%. So no, it was just to show that a figure should go in there.
Thank you.
Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I actually thought it's quite a big target for the hub, 75%. But I want to show confidence. I think we believed right at the start we could do this without the funding sources that we've got now. So I'm happy with the 75% in there, and I actually think that's probably quite fair for council as well.
So right, so the recommendation stands in for this.
Recommendation, yes.
I need a second, Councillor Ludeman. Any further discussion before we put it to the vote? I'll have a show of hands on this too, please. So all those in favour, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye. 1, 2. So this is for.
I can't vote.
1, 2, 3, 4.
You can. Sorry.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And Councillor Kennedy, you in as well? 13. I can't vote. You can 13. There's two haven't.
And those against, please raise your hands and say no. The 2. And do you want your vote recorded? Yep. Selwyn?
Yep.
Both councillors Wilkinson and Catherwood want their vote recorded. No, I know.
Sorry, Your Worship. I think.
Yeah, I know he spoke for it, but he voted against.
He's changed his mind.
He got confused.
Yeah.
It's wrong.
I'm actually going to have to take it because we took the votes and it was done, but it's inconsequential.
Your Worship, the minutes can still record that there was there was an intention by Councillor Wilkinson to vote for the motion, but the vote has been taken. That can still be shown.
Thank you. So can that be shown? Is it Larissa doing the notes? Are you still Larissa? Justine. Yeah, no, we're right. We got it. Thank you for that, councillors. Appreciate that. And we're now over to Clutha War Memorial and Borough Buildings demolition. Jules, is there anything you wish to add to your item?
Thank you, Your Worship. There, due to the change of this being considered through the annual plan process due to the funding requirements, there are a couple of late submissions from people who have spoke to council previously. So just like to note those. We also went back to the other submitters, which I think I noted in the email last night, which have submitted through the annual plan process, and they were comfortable with the information they had already provided to date. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Matters open for discussion, councillors. Councillor Boyle.
Just, can I request that the two buildings be taken separately, please, because I think there are different issues regarding them when we come.
Yes, certainly. I'll be taking recommendations 1, 2 and 3 separately. In fact, we'll move.
No, Your Worship. What some members have always asking for is that recommendation 2 is split to A, the council.
Oh, as you were to the 2. I'll get you now.
Yeah. The borough building.
Okay. But know that I'll be taking them separately, and we will have a refined recommendation 2 to have the 2 buildings separate. So let's do the first one, that we received the demolition report. Could someone move? Councillor Kennedy, second Councillor Graham. All those in favour? Those against. Now specifically around recommendation number 2, matters open for discussion.
For the halls first.
Yes, let's do the Clutha War Memorial Hall, and then once we've finished with that discussion and had that vote, we'll do the Clutha Borough Building, the wee one to the side. Councillor Finch, followed by Graham.
Thank you. After the roundtable discussion, there was somebody here said something about where this particular person had been before and how something wasn't progressed, I'm pretty sure. Has anybody got a memory of that?
Here through you, Mr. Mayor, the party interested in buying the hall has purchased the old folks' home, or had. I think he's had it for a couple of years. I'm not sure. And that, from there hadn't actually been much progress on that. But I think he's explained that in one of his
I think it's something more. Thank you.
Councillor Graham, followed by Wheeler.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, we better get back to that. So,
I think that they've both got to be taken together. Sorry, Councillor Wheeler, because part of it is one of the just the car park. On a Wednesday night is Fire Brigade night, and there's quite a bit of traffic there. It also coincides with the BMX skate park nights, and I don't know if you've been there, but there's generally a real crowd there, and it's actually quite a traffic hazard if the borough building and part of the hall can be used as car parking. Certainly make it a lot safer place for the kids. My understanding is that when the community took over the hall, and then the costings turned out that it was going to be prohibitive to build it, the understanding was that it was going to be left for a a memorial garden or park, something like that. I just wonder where in there it's got about funding for the memorial or I just wonder if that actually needs to be in there because and the gardens, because knowing the Kai Promo and Joyce and the team, they would probably tackle that as part of the project. So I don't think that needs to be in there as a defining thing. Reading Mr. Parlane's, is it Parlane? It sounds like nothing would be really done to that hall for quite a long time, and he refers to I'm not sure, I can't remember if it's in there, but when he was here, he wouldn't need to, he could do it cheaper because the earthquake standards wouldn't have to be as high. But then I noticed in here he's talking about having someone running it and having a CAF and all that sort of stuff. And as the councillors that have been down there, needs a lot of work. It's not something a Joe handyman can do or a bit of plastic over the paint to stop the asbestos going in there. I would certainly be in favour of, I wasn't much good at technology at school either.
Did you even go?
Number two.
It's just that number two would be agreed to demolish. Yeah. All right, thank you for that. Councillor Mulwiller, followed by Thompson Kelly.
Well, just to progress the matter, I'll move that council agrees to demolish the Kotangata War Memorial Hall. That's the motion at the moment that I'm prepared to put forward. And the reason for that is okay, we've got a proposal there from a member who wants to do something with it. However, we made a promise to the community in this case, and this is a promise I'm prepared to keep, that this would remain, because of the significance of that site, it would be become a community facility or a community area still, even without the wall there. So I think for that reason we carry on and demolish the wall. And I'll speak to the other matters later on, if I may.
Right, specifically we're looking for a seconder for that, and Councillor Payne was the first one that caught my eye. So we're going to move on a seconder. Specifically the discussions now on the demolition of the Kotangata War Memorial Hall. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I was with you. We went into that hall, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, and it was shot then. And so I just think, and I do think back to the annual plan process, and Joyce Beck spoke their plans for the site, and I think that'd be a real improvement, on where it is in Kai. And so I've got no problems with it being demolished.
Councillor Grant.
I went to that meeting too, Councillor Gowey, and as did the Mayor, and it was quite vocal, and the council was not top of the pops. We've done a lot of work in that time, and now they think the sun shines out certain orifices. So I'd hate to be thrown back and be not welcome in Kai anymore.
Councillor Payne for myself.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've already stated my support of demolishing the hall. I'm just wondering now, though, that after we were to remove the asbestos roof, if we offer the hall to the fire brigade for burning down, it might also save us some costs in the long run. So it's a suggestion.
Can I say, looking back at that meeting that we had a few years ago, that there was an evolution in Kotangata and a growing awareness of the magnificent prospects they got for the future. And we did give a promise, commitment, as always, as a council. They've done magnificent. They went over the road and they spent $1 million on their hall, and they pretty much just did it. We turned around and there it all was done. And it's symptomatic of what's been happening in Kai. They roll up their sleeves and they get into it. And I was nervous when the other parties came along because that's what's happening tomorrow if we were to agree. But in 20 years' time, where is it as a memorial hall? In 50 years' time, as it's falling and melting into the ground, we've got a group that I hugely respect in Kai Promotions. Joyce Beck and the team are instrumental in virtually everything that's good about Kai. They've done a magnificent job, and as you stand in that new hall, they're all waiting to look out at the vista of the memorial gardens to the river and over their town, and it is going to be stunning. And that was the vision that they had right at the start when they went ahead and fulfilled their part of the agreement. And now, to me, it's just us fulfilling our part. I'm going to put it to the vote. We'll just go with that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. Stage 2, old Kaitankata Borough building. And does everyone know the building that we mean? You've got the town hall, and then you've got quite a small building, houses the bit of the library and a bit of a meeting room and one other room. To say that it's in a dilapidated state is an understatement. I've never known a room with so much water running down the walls. Just like, I don't even know, it might be because it's by the river, but half the river's flowing down the walls. It's not a good building. It's not a good building. Gaynor.
Thank you. Reading this letter of the person who wants to purchase it, I'm not being picky or personal or anything, but she's lost her life savings and has to start over again. So I don't see that there'll be a lot of money to be able to be put into it to get a bed and breakfast up and going. So I think it should have the same fate as well as the other building, and I think it should be pulled down and tidy it up and let the fire brigade have their parking and stuff done there.
Are you moving in that direction?
Yes.
So we're going to move that council agrees to the demolition of the old Kaitankata Borough building. Do I have a second, please? Councillor Sutherland. Matter open for discussion. Councillor Grant.
Yeah. If I was a cynic, I'd say I wouldn't take much notice of that sob story, but I'm not. But she's talking about a future, and I suppose the future depends on having a lot of people going through this bed and breakfast right beside the fire brigade. I don't know how often the fire siren goes in Kai, but I used to live a couple of 100 metres away, and it used to wake me up. So I think if you're about 10 metres away from the siren, you wouldn't get too many repeat stays. So I can't see it. I don't know, good on it, but I couldn't see it being a success.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, I knew what I was doing. Councillor Volmela.
Yeah, I'm sort of reluctant to see this. Sorry, I'm sort of reluctant to see this this dismissed so quickly and the building demolished. For a start, who's going to own the land after the building is demolished? That be in council's hand, just be a parking area. Who's going to be responsible for maintaining the parking area? I had a look on the Street View map last night. I don't think Kaitankata's got that much traffic that it's got a parking problem in the area. Okay, there might be congestion of vehicles around there when the fire brigade's called out or has a practice, something like that. But if somebody's indicated that they are willing to do up buildings, and at the moment we're trying to put more housing into Kaitankata too, and we're supporting that. So basically that block, I mean, Kaitankata's got a lot of open land at the moment with the skateboard parkers. I think there was a building demolished there a few years ago next to the skateboard park, and that was added to the skateboard park. It's going to be with haulers, that's going to be green space as well. So just demolishing another building there, if somebody's able to put it to good use, and maybe there has to be, if we agree to sell it, there would have to be conditions on that certain progress has to occur within a certain length of time. So So I'm reluctant just to see this demolished. And I also make the point that when Clyde Promotions came and spoke in their submission, they made no mention of the borough building at all, about that being demolished. The submission was entirely about the hall, the old hall, and also when Joyce Beck came and spoke here, I took notes, and I can't say for certain she didn't speak on the borough building. I don't have any notes about her wanting that demolished. So that's sort of my thoughts anyway. I just see Jules has got his hand up.
Jules?
Thank you, Your Worship. Joyce has verbally expressed to me that they received a letter from the Kaitangata Fire Brigade regarding that, and they supported their proposal for it to be demolished and for it to be a parking area.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, can I ask, or someone to please tell me when that building was last occupied?
Technically it is occupied. It's still got the library buildings, the library books in it, but it's a damp building in the books. It's cold. I should go right back to the start on the Clyde Promotions meetings that we go to. There's always cars parked around there. It's the one place in Clyde, probably the only place in Clyde that I've parked in. And there's a heap of...
You got
3 minutes,
52 seconds.
You'll sort that out, Jules, will you?
Will need to be Justine.
Justine. She's got under control. So yeah, but the building is technically in use, but it's so dysfunctional that it gets very little use. Would be an easy way to put it.
Through you, Your Worship, my understanding too was that the library functions are being transferred to the new community facility. So I suspect once that happens, it may get very little use as meetings, I imagine, will be happening at the new facility as well. As has been mentioned, it's as you've mentioned yourself, it has serious condensation issues with the concrete walls, and it does have an asbestos roof as well.
Right. I'm going to move this on. I want a recommendation from someone, please.
I did.
Oh, you did? As you go. Well, you've moved it on magnificently. Yeah. I'm going to move it on further. We're going to put it to a vote. Justine, are you okay with this, or are they gone? Should we hesitate a minute?
Well, we can say verbally how many there were for and against, though, can't we? Well,
yeah, but it's getting recorded in the minutes. Where are you going, Councillor Bolwell, during a vote?
Under pressure, Your Worship.
You know, if the timing comes, you're out of here. So the motion is that we agree to the demolition of the old Kaitangata Borough building.
and Councillor Bolwell has exited the room.
Yeah, we've done that, haven't we? We've done the moving and the second. That really confuses me. Hey, team, can we just have it that while we're in the middle of a discussion, you don't leave the room, because now I'm really stuck as to... Yeah, I know. And consequently, if I go ahead with the vote...
He knew that.
He knew that when he left. Yeah. Righto, so I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Thank you for that. Motion passed. Can we please just be conscious of the voting and the standing orders for leaving halfway through a discussion?
If you've got to go, you've got to go.
True. True, that is true. We also need to give an indication of does it come out of, do we do the A, B or C, Steve? Has anyone got an idea of A, B or C?
Where are you going back?
Whole district.
Oh, right, sorry.
Where would we normally have it come from? Steve, it's only a directive.
Didn't we agree to, wasn't it putting it down anyway at one stage? It was 100,000. I've got it in my head.
Yeah, but where did, it's one of those three.
I don't know where it was coming from, but we've already agreed to it.
Jules or Sharon, can you tell us what the original budget was going to be funded from, please?
Yes, through you, Your Worship. The original 85,000 that was approved was using all of the Kaitangata Hall reserves, which didn't cover the total cost. It was only about a third of that, and the balance was as a loan. The earlier discussions we had was that it was preference not to have a loan funding for that. as it's effectively getting rid of a facility, but happy to be guided by council. We can accommodate that from building reserves. However, it may mean that in the future we may need a small loan when other building work comes online in about 3 to 5 years.
So I'm looking for guidance, councillors, as to which one of the three options we have for funding. Which one are we going to take it from? Do we keep it as where it's at, Councillor Graham?
Well, if we go back to Councillor Payne's about the fire brigade demolishing it.
There is still going to be a cost.
Yeah, there is to do reduce, but if you go back to, sure, maybe we can get a hold of Mr. Parlane, who has this way of sort of encapsulating the asbestos, so it's least harmful and can be.
At the moment, though, where it is, what we're wanting to do is get one of the three funding options.
If the fire brigade can demolish that, maybe that'll influence where the money comes from, because it may not be as much, or it shouldn't.
Steve, can I just get some direction on this?
Yeah, right. So I think the only thing it will do will be reducing the total cost. It still has to be funded. So if we can find ways to reduce the cost, we obviously will, but you still have to determine where the cost would be achieved through. So that's the question.
Yeah. I'm going to move this forward and just say that, where's it at the moment, Steve? It comes out of the... So I'm going to say that we maintain where it's at the moment, the building and council reserves. Throw that up and gain it.
Thank you. We had a building a while ago and offered it to the fire brigade, and because of all the health and safety things, they're not as keen as they used to. There was so many rules and regulations around it, so they may not be able to do it anymore.
There are other avenues in common.
Hold on, guys. We've got to pull this in, because we're not talking of the house. We're talking of the where we're taking the money.
I'll move the building or council reserve.
Right, so we've got building or council reserves as the place. Councillor Cowie seconded. We put it to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Now, it's come to my attention that seeing as we're under COVID restrictions and many of us are going to have to go down the street to get our lunch, that we're going to have to now adjourn the meeting, and my apologies to Nolene and the Quarterwegs. We're going to have to adjourn the meeting so that we can start the council meeting at 1:30, and at the completion of the public excluded part of the council meeting, which I suggest we don't need to take into public excluded, we will come back to page 82. So I adjourn this section.
Sorry, Your Worship, the alternative, so that you can be controlling the decisions, because there aren't actually many decisions in the council meeting, is just to open the council meeting, do your apology.
That's what I'm going to do, so that we have the guidance.
Why do we need an hour for lunch? Why can't we just work with that?
Some of us will go down the street.
Time you get to do
Well, I said to others, you don't have to bring your lunch, we can go. So meeting's adjourned, and I will do that. We'll open the council meeting and we'll adjourn it, and we'll come back. So Nolan and the Quarterwegs, it'll be about 1:30 that we'll be back in page 82. Thank you, councillors. See you back at 1:30.